Chapter 26, Mutated Blue-Silver Grass. Evolution to Blue-Silver Emperor. Before leaving, you made one final invitation to Xiao Wu's mother, asking if she wanted to leave with you, but she refused. A 100,000-year soul beast that has taken human form must reach the watershed of level 70 before they can completely shed their spirit beast aura and become exactly like a real human, never to be discovered by any human spirit master again except during pregnancy. She is only in her 60s now, and walking in the human world is extremely dangerous. Moreover, the woman smiled and said, I still have Da Ming, Ming, and the others here, I won't have any trouble. Her brows and eyes were full of confidence. She felt that no human spirit master could come to the dangerous core area of the Star Do Great Forest to hunt her, as she knew what kind of monster was beneath the Lake of Life. Outside the simulation, Fang Yuan saw this development, and he couldn't help but put on a painful expression. If he could save Xiao Wu's mother and use her a little, the rating for this simulation would definitely not be low. Even if he couldn't become a god for some reason, becoming a titled Douluo or even a limit Douluo would be no problem. However, he just couldn't stop someone who was determined to seek death. Watching the determined and confident woman, you shook your head helplessly and left. After taking human form as a 100,000-year soul beast, you were just 5 years old and had not yet undergone awakening, so you began your journey of wandering the human world. You chose to enter the Heaven Do Empire, first exchanging the local specialties you brought out of the Star Do Great Forest for gold coins, then entering a relatively friendly village to obtain a clean identity as an orphan. Your daily routine was pretending to go up the mountain to set traps for small animals and dig wild vegetables, while actually training your body. Time passed, and soon you were 6 years old. A spirit master from Spirit Hall came to the village to help with the awakening. The spirit master from Spirit Hall naturally identified your blue-silver king as a mutated blue-silver grass. After checking that your innate spirit power was at the full level, he hesitated for a moment before asking if you wanted to join Spirit Hall. If it were before, you might have happily agreed. However, you were now a 100,000-year soul beast in human form. Wouldn't going to Spirit Hall be like lighting a lamp in a latrine, courting death? You pretended to be somewhat tempted, but ultimately declined politely, saying you didn't want to go to school so far away. In reality, as soon as this Spirit Hall deacon extended the invitation, he immediately regretted it. In the general consensus, blue-silver grass was a trash spirit, so what did it matter even if it was mutated and had innate full spirit power? Now, hearing you refuse, he actually breathed a sigh of relief. You used the certificate from Spirit Hall to enroll in a low-level Spirit Master Academy in a nearby town. You hid yourself within the academy, and by the age of 12, you had quietly cultivated to level 35 before leaving. There wasn't much time left for you. Tang San was also over 12 years old now. As the Blue-Silver King, you also possessed the Blue-Silver Domain, although its effects were not as strong as the Blue-Silver Emperor's. The Blue-Silver Domain had 3 main functions. First, isolation barrier, second, plant manipulation, and third, environmental exploration. Among them, environmental exploration could be considered a divine skill in the forest, capable of combining with mental force to probe detailed information within the domain. Relying on this skill, Fang Yuan was able to safely arrive near the ice and fire yin-yang well in the Sunset Forest. As for how to pass through Dugu Bo's poisonous barrier, outside the simulation, Fang Yuan glanced at Du Guyan beside him but said nothing. As the saying goes, one can guard against everything, but it's hard to guard against an inside job. Relying on the blue-silver domain and the antidote for the poisonous barrier, you successfully entered the ice and fire yin-yang well. You consumed the Watch the Autumn Water Dew, Strange Velvet Sky Chrysanthemum, Narcissus Jade Skin Bone, and other immortal herbs suitable for you. You began to digest the medicinal effects of these immortal herbs. Impurities were constantly expelled from your body, and your blue-gold short hair began to grow longer, draping down smoothly until it reached your ankles. Stalks of blue-silver grass began to grow beneath your feet, rapidly spreading around you. With the help of so many immortal herbs, you finally forcibly broke through the shackles and, without the blue-silver emperor bloodline, evolved into the new blue-silver emperor. You opened your hand, and your spirit, the blue-silver emperor, appeared in it. It had become tougher and more powerful, its surface covered in intricate and magnificent gold patterns. Your blue-silver domain also underwent an evolution. The surrounding blue-silver grass also swayed around you, tiny specks of blue light gathering together and merging into your body to celebrate the birth of the new emperor. Moreover, under the spirit power boost of the immortal herbs, you reached level 40 and automatically condensed a special spirit ring. Its age automatically adapted to your body's current limit of endurance. It was purple bordering on black, nearly 10,000 years old, and it possessed a unique, evolvable attribute. It could increase its age on its own as your strength grew and your physical constitution improved. Because you were following the life control path, this spirit ring's ability was not the blue-silver overlord spear, but rather life parasite. This spirit ability allowed your blue-silver grass seeds to quietly parasite onto an enemy, and then, under your control, directly drain the enemy's life force and spirit power to grow rapidly, causing the enemy to fall into a weakened state and controlling them. After achieving your goal, as a 100,000-year soul beast in human form, you had no intention of participating in the Advanced Spirit Master competition and walking into a trap. You found out Tang San's whereabouts, and after confirming he was at Shrek Academy, you immediately rushed to the cave behind the waterfall on the back mountain of Saint Spirit Village in Nuoding City, where you found the main body of the previous blue-silver emperor, Yin, as well as the 100,000-year spirit bone she produced after her death. Yin's consciousness was currently muddled. Having grown in a dark stone chamber that never saw the sun, she was very weak. Facing you, the new blue-silver emperor, she swayed happily and expressed her submission. As the current blue-silver emperor, you did not hesitate to use the 100,000-year right leg bone produced by the previous blue-silver emperor on yourself. After absorbing the spirit bone, you brought Yin to the blue-silver forest. The blue-silver king also expressed his submission to you, though he still felt loyalty to his old master, Yin, and contributed quite a bit of energy to her, accelerating Yin's recovery. As the new king, you did not mind your subjects becoming powerful. In any case, they would be your assistants in the future. With the support of the entire forest of blue-silver grass, your cultivation speed increased several times over. In the blink of an eye, 3 years passed, and you became a level 56 spirit king. You stayed in the blue-silver forest and did not actively contact the outside world, and very few spirit masters came to the blue-silver forest, which was full of blue-silver grass, to hunt for spirit rings, so you were not clear about the current situation. However, calculating the time, it was already time for the Advanced Spirit Master competition, and it wouldn't be long before Tang Hao would bring Tang San to the blue-silver forest to awaken the blue-silver emperor. Chapter 27 Poisoning in Heaven Do City, the 8 Trials of the Sea God and Darkening. Before Tang Hao could bring Tang San to the blue-silver forest, you left with Yin. You placed Yin in the ice and fire yin-yang well. The ice and fire yin-yang well had changed drastically. Back then, you had used all the usable immortal herb, packed up and taken away anything unsuitable, and even dug up the only harmful snowy swan kiss. Now, the entire ice and fire yin-yang well was empty, the ground had been plowed over, and only the ubiquitous blue-silver grass grew there. Yin was transplanted among them, unremarkable. Under the rapid maturation of the ice and fire yin-yang well, this treasure land, these ordinary blue-silver grass had actually reached a cultivation age of several decades. On the road, you still passively heard about this year's Advanced Spirit Master competition. The winning academy of this Advanced Spirit Master competition was Shrek Academy, an academy you had never heard of before. Moreover, Shrek Academy had won by the weak, overcoming the strong, defeating the Spirit Hall Academy, which had been winning consecutive championships. It was hard not to cause a discussion. You felt a bit cynical hearing this. Was this really the ground floor of Xuanwan? Could Tang San just randomly kill people above his rank with hidden weapons and Tang sect cultivation technique? However, you did not hear anything about the 100,000-year transformed spirit beast at Shrek Academy. You hesitated between the Asura God's trial and the Seagod 9 trials. In the end, you decided to choose the Seagod 9 trials. There was no other way. The Asura God was a hands-off manager who completely ignored his duties. Even if you passed the trials of Slaughter City and comprehended the Slaughter God domain, you were not guaranteed to obtain the Asura God's trial. Tang Chen was backstabbed by Rakshasa. While conducting his 8th trial, the Rakshasa gods' divine thought lurking in Slaughter City secretly interfered, disrupting the legacy trial. Tang Chen, having become the Slaughter King, lost his mind, his body was parasitized by the 9-headed bloody Crimson Bat King, and he completely became the ruler of Slaughter City, the Slaughter King. The Asura god did not care. The twin spirits genius, Spirit Hall Holy Maiden Bibi Dong, went through Slaughter City and comprehended the Slaughter God domain, but she never even saw the Asura God's trial. She was directly intercepted by the Rakshasa god. The Asura god did not care. In your first simulation, you also went through Slaughter City, but what you saw was the Rakshasa god. You never saw the Asura God's trial, and in the end, you were killed by the Rakshasa god and Bibi Dong. In the original work, besides Tang San, quite a few people went through Slaughter City and comprehended the Slaughter God domain: Tang Hao, Huliena, Bibi Dong, yet none of them obtained the Asura God's trial. You felt that Slaughter City was just a nesting ground for the Rakshasa god. Except for Tang San and the screwed-over Tang Chen, no one else who went there would ever obtain the Asura God's trial. You arrived at Heaven Do City, planning for the Heaven Do National Treasure, the vast sea cosmic shroud. You could not cooperate with anyone because you were a 100,000-year transformed spirit beast. Whether it was the titled Douluo protecting Emperor Shui Yi, or the snake lance Douluo and porcupinefish Douluo beside Qian Xunji, who was disguised as Shui Qing, they could all easily see through your identity. After racking your brain, you finally figured it out. You knew that humans, after all, had their limits. You were done being human. Although you weren't human this time anyway. You crazily released poison in Heaven Do City. The poison Douluo's poisonous barrier combined with the snowy swan kiss. This immortal herb itself was non-toxic, but it possessed the terrifying property of amplifying the effects of any toxin 1,000-fold. With the two combined, even though you had diluted it, the effect was terrifying. Meanwhile, you carried the Yushang Qiluo immortal herb with you, making you immune to the poison. Amidst the chaos, you quietly entered the quiet Heaven Do treasure vault and took away the vast sea cosmic shroud. Leaving the vault, you watched as the poisoned Douluo, who was mistaken for the culprit because of the poison mist, was being hunted down while taking Duguyan with him. Looking at the panic-stricken Heaven Do City, you felt as if some kind of shackle had been broken. You pulled up the hood of your cloak and turned to leave without hesitation. You crossed the ocean and arrived at Seagod Island, passed through the sea within the sea, and came before the seahorse sacred pillar. You didn't know if your identity as a spirit beast would allow you to obtain the sea god's trial. After all, for so many years, there had been no precedent of a spirit beast becoming a god. The light of the sacred pillar flickered constantly. Finally, it descended with a Sea God 8 trials. At the same time, a force pulled your vast sea cosmic shroud, which floated out and flew into the air. The Sea God wanted to take back your vast sea cosmic shroud. You sensed it and wanted to stop it, but were directly suppressed by the Sea God's divine might. You accepted it on the surface. You began to cultivate peacefully on Seagod Island for your god's trial. Although you were a spirit beast transformed into human form, High Priestess Bo Saishi of Seagod Island still accepted you and carefully cultivated you as the next High Priest of Seagod Island. At 18, you had already become a spirit saint, and the Seagod 8 trials had progressed to the 6th trial. And you finally learned a piece of information. According to the iron law of Seagod Island, anyone who passed the trials regardless of rank must stay on the island for the rest of their life to serve the sea god, otherwise they would suffer the wrath of the god. This rule was strictly enforced, even for the titled Douluo of the 7 sacred pillars and the high priestess of Seagod Island, Bo Saishi. Although they were powerful, they could not leave the island for even a single step for the rest of their lives. And as the next high priest of Seagod Island who had obtained the Seagod 8 trials, you had to stay on Seagod Island and serve the sea god for the rest of your life. Because in the original work, Tang San and his companions left Seagod Island very smoothly, you had almost forgotten this rule. You turned dark, but you chose to endure. You cultivated even harder, and finally, at 20, you became a spirit Douluo and completed the 8th trial, obtaining a god-bestowed spirit ring with an age of 100,000 years. As you completed the Seagod 8 trials, you began to be accepted by Seagod Island, and you slowly learned about the structure of Seagod Island. On this day when you were 21, people suddenly arrived at Seagod Island. Arriving at Seagod Island was Tang San, who had just broken through to the Spirit Emperor rank not long ago, with a spirit power of rank 62. Tang San was accompanied by Zhu Zuqing, Dai Mubai, Ma Hongjun, and others, but Xiao Wu was nowhere to be seen. They came under the Seahorse Sacred Pillar. Tang San obtained the Seagod 9 trials, while the others only obtained Black Level 4 trials, Purple Level 3 trials, 2 trials, or even Yellow Level 1 trials. Because Tang San obtained the Seagod 9 trials, you went out with High Priestess Bo Saishi to meet Tang San. Because of your interception, Tang San's blue-silver grass could not evolve into the blue-silver emperor, and his appearance remained the same ordinary look as before. There was not a trace of Yin in him, instead, he looked very much like Tang Hao. He wasn't ugly, but he wasn't handsome either, though his temperament was elegant and indifferent. Because the Wangchuan Chushui Du had been picked by you, the current Tang San had not received a huge boost in either mental force or purple demon eye, and he was unable to see through your true form. Chapter 28, Dark Blue-Silver Emperor, Blue-Silver Purgatory. High Priestess Bo Saishi looked at Tang San. Although she remained outwardly calm, her eyes were obscure. High Priestess Bo Saishi handed the task of receiving them over to you, and you smiled and agreed. Ning Rongrong scrutinized you, asking if you had met before. You shook your head in denial. While you were talking, Oscar watched you with a vigilant expression. Ning Rongrong noticed Oscar's unfriendly gaze, glanced back at him, but said nothing. This time, without the immortal herb 8-petal fairy orchid, Oscar's cultivation progress slowed down significantly. He was now far behind the Shrek average, and there was not even a shadow of his 6th spirit ability, Mirror Image Sausage, which could enhance combat power. According to the clan rules of the 7 Treasure Glazed Tile School, the spouse of a direct disciple must be a combat-type spirit master. It was simply impossible for Ning Rongrong and Oscar to be together. You met Oscar's murderous gaze, merely smiling slightly. Your soft, blue-gold hair cascaded down, with the blue sky, white clouds, and the sparkling sea behind you. Oscar's murderous intent intensified. Oscar intended to teach you a lesson. He had the Zug crossbow given to him by third brother. Having traveled outside for these years, Oscar had killed quite a few powerful experts relying on this weapon, so he was naturally confident in it. Even if he failed, with the flying mushroom sausage, Oscar was confident he could escape. As the sun set, on your way back to your residence alone, a crossbow bolt shot out fiercely from the darkness, aiming straight for your head. You tilted your body slightly, deliberately letting yourself get injured, while simultaneously releasing your spirit ability. Blue-silver grass, beautiful as a work of art with blue gold and magnificent golden patterns, burst from the ground and quickly bound Oscar. You did not rush to heal your injury, but instead took the struggling Oscar and his Zug crossbow to see High Priestess Bo Saishi. A newcomer challenger had attacked you, someone who had already passed the trials and was recognized as the quasi-priest, the next High Priestess of Seagod Island. Under normal circumstances, you could have completely killed Oscar. However, Oscar happened to be a friend of Tang San, the god's trial candidate who had received the Seagod 9 trials. The several Holy Pillar Guardians and High Priestess Bo Saishi were caught in a dilemma, ultimately choosing to bring the god's trial candidate Tang San over first. As soon as Tang San entered, he sensed the unfriendly gazes around him. He saw his companion Oscar bound and lying in the center of the main hall. Although he was unsure what had happened, murderous intent flashed in his eyes. However, hindered by the disparity in strength between the two sides and the fact that subsequent trials still required the help of these Holy Pillar Guardians, Tang San restrained himself, bowed elegantly, and asked, "Everyone, I do not know what has happened. May I ask why my friend has been bound?" Seeing the humble attitude of this Seagod god's trial candidate, the expressions of the Holy Pillar Guardians softened slightly. Seahorse Douluo told Tang San about Oscar's actions. After listening, Tang San's expression remained unchanged, defending Oscar by claiming it was all a misunderstanding. Oscar was just practicing shooting the Zug crossbow and had accidentally injured you. In reality, after hearing it, Tang San already understood. Oscar had vented his anger on you because of Ning Rongrong, which was why he attacked you. There was not the slightest misunderstanding in the middle. However, in Tang San's view, since you provoked Ning Rongrong and wanted to cuckold his brother, even if he really killed you, it would be because you had a path to death, and you could blame no one else. In the end, this matter was left unsettled. After all, Tang San was a god's trial candidate, and you had only suffered a minor injury. No one noticed that within your beautiful and magnificent blue-silver emperor, a wisp of black appeared. No one knew either that when you came to Seagod Island, you brought a pile of saltpeter, charcoal, and sugar in your spatial spirit tool. The little freaks of Shrek were busy with cultivation, and you were also busy with your own affairs. At 26, you reached level 97 in cultivation, while Tang San, through the rewards of his god's trial, had caught up to reach level 96. You were not jealous, on the contrary, you watched Tang San and his companions with great gratification, very happy to see them growing robustly, and looked forward to the day of the harvest. Tang San hunted the deep-sea demon whale king and returned to Seagod Island, where you hosted a celebratory banquet for them. The island was decorated with lanterns and colored streamers, the aroma of food wafting through the air, and the liquor and water were well prepared. Even Tang San could not help but participate. As a Tang sect disciple, he was confident that there were no problems with the liquor and food. Just when everyone was slightly tipsy, you stood by the cliff of Seagod Mountain, listening to the sound of the waves crashing against the reefs below, enjoying the beautiful scenery of the moon rising over the sea. Then, with a boom, the entire Seagod Island was shaking violently. The residents on the island scrambled to flee because of this huge explosion. The 7 holy pillars and High Priestess Bo Saishi were all alarmed, wanting to go and protect Seagod Island. However, the moment they used their spirit power, blue-silver grass, intertwined with wisps of black, burst out from their bodies. Flesh, spirit power, and even their soul turned into nourishment for this dark blue-silver emperor. I do not know when it happened, but stalks of blue-silver grass could be seen everywhere on Seagod Island. At this moment, all of this blue-silver grass had turned black. Seagod Island had turned into a bloody purgatory. Tang San wanted to use his Tang sect cultivation technique to suppress the blue-silver grass seeds within his body, but he despaired to find that, for some reason, his power seemed to be suppressed. This was the suppression of the blue-silver emperor over Tang San, who possessed the blue-silver grass bloodline. As a limit Douluo who could use divine force, High Priestess Bo Saishi could barely suppress the blue-silver grass that was frantically absorbing nourishment within her body. Fang Yuan, High Priestess Bo Saishi looked at Seagod Island, which had raised her and which she had protected for her entire life, turning into ruins and a blue-silver purgatory, and let out an angry roar. Beneath your feet, you were connected to your subjects, receiving their endless supply of nourishment. Your spirit power was rising rapidly. Your originally beautiful blue-gold hair and eye color turned black, and your ethereal, stunning aura vanished entirely, becoming dark and evil. You were very excited, you finally understood the real method. High Priestess Bo Saishi, suppressing the dark blue-silver grass within her body and having saved Tang San, found her way to you. At this moment, she could no longer maintain her beautiful, young appearance, and her eyes were filled with hatred as she looked at you. Tang San looked at you, not knowing why, but he felt a sense of submission to you from his bloodline, even though he clearly had not felt this way before. He did not know that this was because you had intentionally suppressed your blue-silver emperor aura before. Looking at the two who had walked up to you, you smiled slightly and looked up. Chapter 29, The Correct Simulation Posture, the Soul-Stirring Wind and Clouds. Fang Yuan saw this, and he felt that those previous grievances had finally been avenged. Vaguely, Fang Yuan finally understood the correct simulation posture. In this simulation, he honestly evolved his spirit, honestly took the vast sea cosmic shroud to Seagod Island, and honestly took the trials, without flirting or getting into trouble. Yet, as a result, the vast sea cosmic shroud was taken away, and he was given the red level 8 trials of the next High Priestess of Seagod Island. Perhaps others would be overjoyed to receive the favor of a divinity and obtain the red level 8 trials. But Fang Yuan had memories from his previous life and was not some fanatical believer in the sea god. He was single-mindedly focused only on becoming a god. Following the rules honestly only led to restrictions everywhere. Truly following his heart and giving it his all led to a much better outcome. Open black lens bracket. You recited a poem from your previous life, feeling it was very fitting for the situation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Soul stirring wind and clouds ripple, the heart is round, the earth is square, the three realms alter. The gate of life and death reincarnation opens, rising again, the killing tribulation washes away the leaden splendor. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You looked up, not at Tang San and High Priestess Bo Saishi, the two blood bags you had almost drained dry, but at the sky above, where a huge and majestic divinity phantom reappeared, glaring at you with wide eyes. You met his gaze without flinching, a smile on your lips. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A divinity cannot directly descend to the lower realm, but they can always use a few small privileges. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Like now, just a wisp of divine sense plus a clone is enough to kill you before you have become a god. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. After realizing something was wrong, the sea god immediately sent down a divine thought, but it was too late. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Watching Seagod Island being destroyed, believers suffering heavy losses, and the candidate for the God's trial crippled, he had nothing but killing intent for you, this 100,000-year soul beast that had taken human form. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The sea god phantom swung the huge sea god trident down at you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Yet you did not dodge or evade. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Bang. A familiar explosion sounded again, and the cliff beneath you was covered in fire and thick smoke. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Before the trident fell, you, High Priestess Bo Saishi, Tang San, and the 500-meter radius around you were all blasted into barren land. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Bastard. The sea god looked at your original position and let out a roar. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. And in the ice and fire yin-yang well of the Heaven Do Empire's sunset forest, a stalk of blue-silver grass, intertwined with black threads in blue and gold, broke through the soil and grew rapidly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. This is the special physique unique to the blue-silver emperor, undying resurrection. Relying on the highest profound truth of the domain, as long as you do not commit suicide, no matter how heavy the injury, you can be resurrected within 49 days. This is also one of the unique talents of the blue-silver emperor. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If the previous blue-silver emperor, Yin, hadn't been in a weak state of pregnancy when she was being hunted, and finally chose to sacrifice and commit suicide, with all her energy given to Tang Hao to become a spirit ring and spirit bone, she would have been fully capable of living another life with this ability. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. To escape Seagod Island and take revenge on the sea god, although you lost a physical body and most of your strength, you did not regret it. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The sea god snatched the vast sea cosmic shroud that you had worked so hard to obtain, fobbed you off with a red level 8 trials, and wanted you to guard Seagod Island for your entire life, to sacrifice for the god's trial candidate who might appear in the future, arrogant and conceited. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Wanting to cut off your path to becoming a god and take your life, merely destroying a Seagod Island was not enough to vent the hatred in your heart. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If your strength were sufficient, you would even want to extract his soul and refine his soul, lighting his soul lamp. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Yin sensed the thick dark aura on you and shivered. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You used your mental force to inspect the nursery and shook your branches in satisfaction. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The ice and fire yin-yang well is indeed a treasure land. Even ordinary blue-silver grass can grow so well here. The blue-silver color occupies the entire ice and fire yin-yang well, like a blue ocean. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The ice and fire yin-yang well accelerates growth. One day here is equivalent to 1,000 days, about 3 years, of growth speed in the outside world. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In this sea of blue-silver grass, there are many thousands or even tens of thousands of years of blue-silver grass. Especially Yin, the former blue-silver emperor, who has extraordinary talent herself, was nourished by the blue-silver king, and has been cultivating at the core of the ice and fire yin-yang well. Now, she is already close to 70,000 years of cultivation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You released all your mental force, sensing every stalk of blue-silver grass. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. With your call, this sea of blue-silver grass seemed to come alive. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A faint blue radiance quietly emerged from every stalk of blue-silver grass. A single stalk might only emit a tiny blue dot of light, but when the blue light from hundreds of millions of blue-silver grass converged, it became a blue ocean. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In an instant, under the influence of the blue-gold light spreading from you, the blue light in the air became significantly more massive. On the ground, every stalk of blue-silver grass began to become crystal clear and began to grow crazily. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Even Yin overcame her fear of you, and under the influence of the blue-gold aura you released, she also became transparent, her leaves and branches seeming to reveal a look of satisfaction. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were crazily swallowing the energy rushing in from the outside world. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your body grew and stretched at a speed visible to the naked eye. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your age was also constantly increasing. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Days rose and set. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You reached 100,000 years again and transformed into human form. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You left the ice and fire yin-yang well, and all the way out, you sowed dark blue-silver grass seeds. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You arrived in the outside world. Because of your interference, the outside world had been turned upside down. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. When you poisoned Heaven Do City, it directly aggravated the toxin in Emperor Shui Yi. Although he was rescued later, Emperor Shui Yi still died half a year later. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. And the Shui Qing disguised by Qian Xunji logically succeeded to the throne, becoming the new emperor of Heaven Do. Qian Xunji completely controlled the Heaven Do Empire, dealt with Prince Shui Xing and Shui Bang, and started a war against the Star Luo Empire. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Under the secret intervention of Spirit Hall, the Heaven Do Empire and the Star Luo Empire suffered heavy losses. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. And Tang San was far away on Seagod Island and did not return, and was later drained dry and killed by you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Just at this moment, you suddenly heard news about Tang San again. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. It was Tang San exposing Qian Xunji's true identity, uniting the Star Luo Empire and the Heaven Do Empire to counterattack Spirit Hall. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Especially when you learned that Tang San not only survived but also reached level 98. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were so jealous that you were falling apart. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The sea god, this bastard. Close black lens bracket. Outside the simulation, Fang Yuan's eyes were also red. Why, during the first simulation, I also had twin spirits and obtained the sea god's trial, yet I died, and the sea god didn't resurrect me. This double standard. This is a conspiracy. Open black lens bracket. You swore that sooner or later you would kill the sea god, this bastard, until he wished he were dead, and let him experience the feeling of Huo Yuhao. Close black lens bracket. Chapter 30. sacrificing all living things, refining to become a god. Failure. Open black lens bracket. Although you are very furious that the sea god cheated to resurrect Tang San, you also understand that you are currently no match for the sea god and Tang San. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Especially since the Asura god, the enforcement god of the god realm, also views Tang San as his successor, there is even less to be said. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You begin to accelerate your progress. As the dark blue silver emperor, you suppress other plant-type spirit beasts and transform them into having the aptitude of the blue silver emperor. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The blue silver grass clan begins to grow wildly across the Douluo Continent. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. This anomaly is discovered by others, but those who discovered it lacked the strength and were turned into your nutrients, while the titled Douluo, Super Douluo, and Limit Douluo with sufficient strength were all busy with the war. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. With your intentional indulgence, the dark blue silver emperor grass seeds parasitize some weak animal spirit beasts and human spirit masters. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The Great War reached its end. Although he lacked companions like Oscar and Dai Mubai, Tang San still relied on using hidden weapons like the Yama invitation to wantonly assassinate the titled Douluo of the Spirit Hall side, leveling the gap between the two sides and gradually gaining the advantage. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. And you also know that opportunity knocks but once. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. When the Spirit Hall and Tang San were in their decisive battle, you made your move. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Ordinary plant spirit beasts, low to mid-tier animal spirit beasts, ordinary people, and human spirit masters began to sprout dark blue silver grass wildly from their bodies, draining the host's life chi, flesh, and even soul. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The battlefield was no exception. Large swaths of soldiers and spirit masters below the Spirit King rank were completely unable to resist the blue-silver grass growing from within their bodies. Their roots took hold in flesh and blood, soldiers trying to forcibly pull them out only tore away large chunks of flesh, accelerating their own deaths. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. And you also began to enjoy the real feast. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. All living beings were shocked by your madness and evil, whether they were divinities, humans, or spirit beasts. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The wind stirred your long black hair. Your complexion remained fair, exquisite, and beautiful, like a work of art. Your figure was gaunt, and your clothes and black hair swayed with the wind as you looked down. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You remained unmoved, you just wanted to become a god. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. This time, you slaughtered almost all ordinary humans and low to mid-tier spirit masters, and weak plant and animal spirit beasts were almost completely exterminated by you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Xiao Wu also looked at you in shock, your hair black, your skin snowy, and your demeanor extremely calm, unable to connect you with the well-behaved and handsome boy from before. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your rank rose rapidly, rank 98, rank 99, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were stuck at rank 99. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, but you could never break through that bottleneck. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Spirit beasts cannot become gods. It seems that even if they take human form, they cannot escape this curse. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You looked at the sky calmly, gazing fearlessly at the lightning flashing within the dark clouds above. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were no longer just draining the life chi of those living beings, you began to absorb the life chi of the blue-silver grass. Ah Yin, who was closest to you, was the first to die. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Large swaths of blue-silver grass began to wither, and the silver-blue ocean that originally covered the entire continent began to recede. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. This vast energy surged into your body, your final struggle, but the divinities of the god realm did not give you a chance. A massive purple lightning bolt fell from the sky, engulfing you entirely. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Relying on your tenacious vitality, your body was repeatedly scorched black by the lightning and then recovered. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You failed to break through, you were struck dead by the divinities, lightning. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Although you are dead, your story is not over yet. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At the moment of your death, in the heart of the Star-Do Great Forest, a massive golden-eyed black dragon raised its dragon head, looking in your direction and sighing leisurely. Can even a madman who has gone to such lengths not become a god? Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your existence was listed as a taboo by the continent, and your clan, the Blue Silver Grass Clan, was even regarded as the embodiment of evil. The continent began a weeding operation that swept across the entire continent. Both humans and spirit beasts united tacitly at this moment. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The divinities of the god realm became even more convinced of the evil of the spirit beast clan and took it as a warning. Subsequent lightning tribulations became even more severe. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Rating 158. You were initially just a blue-silver king. When the previous blue-silver emperor died, you were fortunate enough to grow to 100,000-year cultivation, and you received the help of a noble rabbit to protect you when you had just transformed into a human cub. You left the Star-Do Great Forest, entered the ice and fire yin-yang well, relied on immortal herbs, and evolved into the blue-silver emperor. You subdued the previous blue-silver emperor, Yin, and the blue-silver king in the blue-silver forest, and obtained the 100,000-year blue-silver emperor right leg bone, which was of great benefit to you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You entered Seagod Island with the vast sea cosmic shroud, and your luck ended there. Your vast sea cosmic shroud was taken away by the sea god, you received the red level 8 trials, and became the successor to the priest of Seagod Island. You could not become a god, nor could you leave Seagod Island. Tang San received the Seagod 9 trials. You were jealous of them and set a trap to teach Oscar a lesson for attacking you, but it was lightly brushed aside. You completely darkened, refined most of the people on Seagod Island, and completely destroyed Seagod Island. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You know that some things cannot be stopped once they have begun, but you do not regret it. You use the special physique of the Blue-Silver Emperor and your own dark attributes to grow rapidly again. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You launched your plan to become a god during the Great War. Hundreds of millions of living beings were refined by you. You did not want their sacrifice to be in vain and strived to become a god, but unfortunately. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Sacrificing all living things, refining to become a god. Failure. However, you also left a brilliant mark on this world, proving the power of the blue-silver grass for the blue-silver grass clan. Close black lens bracket. Looking at this ending, Fang Yuan recalled the fate he had at the beginning of this simulation. Jade shatters and the pearl sinks. It is fitting indeed. If it weren't for my background as a spirit beast, given my persistence and madness in this simulation, I really might have been able to become a god. It's a pity. In this simulation, he had been struck and darkened, his spirit mutated into the dark blue-silver emperor, and the special physique of the blue-silver emperor itself revived, suppressing, commanding, and draining the life chi of his own kind. His tenacious vitality parasitized other living beings, and combined with the extreme devouring power of the dark blue-silver emperor, he was able to achieve such an outrageous effect. This kind of success might not be replicable in the next simulation. There were some regrets, but Fang Yuan still focused on the present and looked at the final rewards that appeared. Open black lens bracket. Rewards. 31 destiny points. Spirit. Dark blue-silver emperor. 100,000-year blue-silver emperor right leg bone. Rank 30 spirit power. Vast sea cosmic shroud. Close black lens bracket. Looking at these rich rewards and comparing them with the previous ones, Fang Yuan fell silent. Is it that the higher the rating, the better the rewards? It was just that because the simulation ratings had been getting worse each time, he hadn't felt anything. Looking at the vast sea cosmic shroud at the end of the rewards, Fang Yuan claimed this reward. The vast sea cosmic shroud was only the size of a palm, and Fang Yuan could easily hold it in his hand. Its entire body was crystal clear and azure blue, suffused with a precious glow. Its exterior was a very regular three-dimensional triangular shape, similar to a 3D pyramid or tetrahedron. As Fang Yuan touched it, its azure surface rippled with water-like patterns. These patterns were not carved, they looked alive, flowing, and circles of blue light constantly flickered. Now that I've retrieved the vast sea cosmic shroud, I wonder if the version of me in the simulation will stop being angry. Fang Yuan said jokingly. Chapter 31, Simulation Side Effects, Can I Become Empress? While Fang Yuan was receiving the rewards from this simulation, changes were unknowingly emerging in the outside world. A passerby accidentally caught sight of some blue-silver grass by the roadside and suddenly let out a scream, "Ah!" He recoiled violently, stumbling and falling to the ground in a panic. His companion, startled, turned around and asked, "What's wrong?" Then, seeing the blue-silver grass at their own feet, they also screamed, "Ah!" The sound was even more wretched than their companions, and a puddle of warm, yellow liquid even began to slowly seep down from their pant leg. After a long while, the two passers-by finally composed themselves. Looking at these ordinary blue-silver grass, they felt puzzled as to why they had been so afraid just a moment ago. Even knowing now that it was only blue-silver grass, their bodies still couldn't help but feel uncontrollable fear and hatred. In the end, with trembling hands, the two overcame their inexplicable fear and cleared away all the blue-silver grass along the road. Similar incidents were occurring in other places. In the forest, a rabbit that had been grazing suddenly spat out the blue-silver grass it had chewed into a pulp, then frantically fled and dug a burrow, its body twitching from time to time. Some people even shouted that blue-silver grass was inherently evil and deserved to die, ignoring the objections of others as they tried to pour oil and set fire to burn the endless fields of blue-silver grass to the ground. In Spirit City, upon the majestic Supreme Pontiff throne, Bibi Dong sat silently, draped in a suit of pitch-black knight armor. The armor, like black iron tempered in the abyss, was cold and hard. Its streamlined plates covered her proud figure, and the ferocious barbs on the shoulder guards tilted slightly upward, perfectly blending this dark aesthetic with an extreme aura of slaughter. She looked like a Valkyrie who had stepped out of an ancient battlefield, beautiful and dangerous. The vast hall was silent, save for her long, slender fingers rhythmically tapping against the armrest of the seat. The crisp yet dull, tap, tap, sound echoed through the empty hall, as if striking at one's heart, leaving anyone who heard it feeling uneasy. Bibi Dong remained silent. The bishop, who had just finished his report, dared not move, trembling as he waited for a response from the Supreme Pontiff. He had been reporting on the recent anomalies within Spirit City. Many people, whether commoners or spirit masters, had inexplicably begun to fear the blue-silver grass seen everywhere by the roadside. Do spirit masters at the Spirit King level and above not experience this phenomenon? Cold sweat broke out on the bishop's forehead, but he hurriedly added, spirit masters at the Spirit King level and above do have a reaction, but it is very slight. Most of them only feel hatred and disgust, without much fear. He himself was a spirit emperor and was naturally aware of his own changes, although he couldn't figure out why he hated the blue-silver grass that grew everywhere. Very well, I understand. You may leave. Bibi Dong waved her hand, signaling the dutiful bishop to withdraw. Yes, Your Excellency, Supreme Pontiff. The bishop bowed his head and backed out of the hall. When the Supreme Pontiff Palace fell completely silent, Bibi Dong closed her eyes and uttered a remark that sounded both resentful and regretful. Could it actually be a 100,000-year blue-silver emperor? No wonder I haven't been able to find it after searching for so long. Similar incidents were occurring in other places. The Heaven Do Empire, Star Luo Empire, Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School, and Clear Sky Sect had all noticed the anomalies among their citizens and disciples. Yet, no matter how they investigated, they could not uncover the cause. Within the main hall of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School, jade pillars reached toward the heavens, and glazed tiles paved the floor. The shimmering treasures illuminated the hall with luxury, yet it did not appear vulgar. Ning Fengji sat there, dressed in simple, elegant robes that were not gaudy. His eyes were as gentle as a spring breeze brushing over water, and his every gesture was calm and graceful. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, carrying a gentle and indifferent air. Yet, every word and sentence held the certainty and authority of one who had led the sect for many years, a demeanor that put the reporting disciple at ease. Ning Fengji first made simple arrangements to have the blue-silver grass within the sect cleared and to reassure the disciples, then dismissed the disciple. Once only 3 people remained in the hall, Ning Fengji turned his head. His gaze first fell on Chen Xin, who stood like a cold sword beside him, then lightly swept over Ji Yurong, who was lounging casually to the side. His voice was gentle, without a shred of sect master authority. "Uncle Sword, Uncle Bone, in your opinion, how should this matter be handled?" He asked with humility and a calm demeanor. Despite being the sect master, he always treated the 2 guardian Douluo with the respect due to elders. Sword Douluo Chen Xin stood as straight as a pine, his sword intent restrained. He merely nodded faintly. "Compared to the outside world, only a small portion of our 7 treasure-glazed tile school disciples fear the blue-silver grass. It is still within a controllable range. In particular, the high-ranking members of the 7 treasure-glazed tile school, such as Ning Fengji, Sword Douluo, and Bone Douluo, were completely unaffected. They felt no hatred, let alone fear, and simply could not understand why those people reacted so strongly to the tiny blue-silver grass." Bone Douluo Ji Yurong, leaning against a pillar, expressed his agreement. "Chen Xin is right. Besides, Fengji, I trust you can handle it well." The gazes they cast toward Ning Fengji were filled with total protection and conviction. After hearing this, Ning Fengji still wore a gentle smile and nodded. "Since Uncle Sword and Uncle Bone both trust me, I will certainly not let you down." After discussing the serious business, the conversation shifted. Sword Douluo asked with concern, "Speaking of which, how is that girl Rongrong doing?" It was strange, although not many disciples in the 7 treasure-glazed tile school were affected, their little princess, Ning Rongrong, happened to be among them and still couldn't return to normal. Speaking of Rongrong, his most beloved daughter, Ning Fengji recalled the once spoiled and confident little princess of the 7 treasure-glazed tile school, who was now filled with terror and fear. He couldn't help but sigh, his tone full of heartache. "It's still no good. I have no choice but to keep Rongrong locked in her room for now." Heaven Do City, Princess Mansion. Princess Shui Ke was also affected, inexplicably fearing the blue-silver grass seen everywhere by the roadside for no apparent reason. However, for Princess Shui Ke, joy now outweighed the fear. She had a dream. Although she couldn't remember most of its content, she remembered that she had actually ascended the throne and become the first empress in the history of the Heaven Do Empire. Coupled with the current situation, the eldest prince, Shui Qing, had not appeared for a long time, his fate unknown, and her 4th older brother, Shui Beng, was only interested in eating, drinking, and having fun, neglecting his duties. The possibility of her ascending the throne was quite high. Thinking of this, Princess Shui Ke could not suppress the smile on her lips. Chapter 32, The Insidious and Vicious Grandfather and Granddaughter, Shui Qing appears. Fang Yuan, who was still staying in the ice and fire yin-yang well with Du Guyan, did not know how much had happened in the outside world. After awakening the dark blue-silver Emperor spirit, receiving the rank 30 spirit power reward, and absorbing the 100,000-year blue-silver Emperor right leg bone, Fang Yuan's total spirit power was roughly at rank 56, but he lacked spirit rings. With only 2 spirit rings now, Fang Yuan could only be considered a quasi-spirit elder. A quasi-spirit elder with a total spirit power of rank 56. Du Guyan was 13 years old now. Before taking the immortal herb, she was only a rank 28 spirit grandmaster. After taking the immortal herb, her spirit evolved, and her spirit power rank increased to rank 35. Under these circumstances, using the vast sea cosmic shroud would be enough to immobilize her. Not to mention, the vast sea cosmic shroud's invisibility, vast sea protective shroud could not only hide his figure but also completely isolate his aura. In the original setting, once activated, even experts at the titled Douluo level would find it difficult to detect. However, whether it could be completely hidden depended on the specific situation. Ordinary titled Douluo rank 90 to 94 basically could not discover it. As long as Fang Yuan remained still or did not initiate an attack, the shroud could completely isolate his aura and figure, sufficient to deceive poison Douluo. Although he had a way to escape, Fang Yuan did not intend to leave immediately. The immortal herb and the 100,000-year transformed spirit beast Xiao Wu were still in the other party's hands. With the vast sea cosmic shroud, Fang Yuan did not need to worry about Dugu Yan, he only needed to consider poison Douluo Dugu Bo. Fang Yuan walked out of the small wooden hut built next to the ice and fire yin-yang well for resting. As soon as he stepped out, he saw Dugu Yan. She seemed to have been crouching outside, fearing that Fang Yuan would run away. The current Dugu Yan seemed to have matured quite a bit in temperament, perhaps due to the previous simulated memories. Her short purple hair just reached her shoulders, making her neck and shoulders look even fairer, but her emerald snake eyes and snake tail made her aura eerie and dangerous. Rather than admiring Dugu Yan's beauty, Fang Yuan was more vigilant of Dugu Yan's danger. Being stared at fixedly by such a pair of eyes, Fang Yuan felt like he was being eyed by a wild beast. His instinctual reaction made Fang Yuan want to take action and gouge out these eyes that made him feel like he was sitting on pins and needles. Yuan, you seem to have become much stronger. Ever since her spirit evolved into the jade phosphor serpent, Dugu Yan had been exceptionally sensitive to auras. And this discovery also made the decision in Dugu Yan's heart gradually firm up. You brat, it's only been about a year since your spirit awakening, right? To actually cultivate to a spirit grandmaster so quickly. Dugu Bo, hearing his granddaughter's words, walked over. He gently placed his hand on Fang Yuan's hand and touched it with a slight force, measuring Fang Yuan's bone age. He was stunned for a moment, then looked down at Fang Yuan and said, "Around 7 years old, cultivated to a spirit grandmaster, with a top-tier beast spirit, and carrying a transformed 100,000-year spirit beast with him." Although he, Dugu Bo, as a titled Douluo, naturally had the qualifications to support his granddaughter and let her do what she wanted. But he was also afraid that his granddaughter would not be able to hold on to a genius of this level. Of course, if his granddaughter really wanted to. A flash of ruthlessness crossed Dugu Bo's eyes, it was not impossible for him to cripple this genius who had not yet grown up. Since he had captured the other party, and no experts had come forward to rescue him until now, he must be a wild genius with no backing but good luck. Crippling him wouldn't bring any trouble. Fang Yuan looked up and met Dugu Bo's gaze. What was Senior just thinking about? Dugu Bo looked at Fang Yuan and grinned. Brat, take a guess. Suddenly, a figure inserted herself between the two. Dugu Yan looked up, her beautiful eyes filled with anger, but her tone was that of a junior acting spoiled toward an elder. Grandfather, don't be so fierce to Yuan. Although Dugu Yan had the same thoughts, but letting others hurt Yuan was something Dugu Yan could not accept. And Fang Yuan, looking at Dugu Yan blocking in front of him, if he hadn't suffered too much from yanderes, he might have been very touched right now. Having spent a lot of time with yanderes, Fang Yuan could even vaguely guess Dugu Yan's thoughts. This grandfather and granddaughter were both not good people. In the evening, the moon rose above the treetops. Fang Yuan's range of movement was restricted. Dugu Yan slept next door. If he made even the slightest noise here, Dugu Yan would hear it. And Dugu Bo was responsible for guarding Xiao Wu. Because the immortal herb of the ice and fire yin-yang well, as well as Xiao Wu, this transformed 100,000-year spirit beast, were all treasures that could not be exposed. The Dugu grandfather and granddaughter simply used the ice and fire yin-yang well as an important stronghold because their manpower was limited and it could not be handed over to outsiders to guard. Dugu Yan had already given up her studies at the Heaven Do Imperial Academy and started to concentrate on cultivating here. Dugu Bo would not leave the ice and fire yin-yang well easily either. Fang Yuan was not surprised by this, but opportunities were always for those who were prepared. Another 3 months passed. Dugu Bo had to leave the ice and fire yin-yang well because of an important matter. It was Prince Shui Xing who came to find Dugu Bo, not even hesitating to use up a favor that Dugu Bo owed him. Dugu Bo considered it repeatedly and eventually agreed. One reason was that he was a righteous person and did not want to owe anyone a favor without repaying it. The second reason was that if he didn't show his face for a long time, it would inevitably arouse suspicion, and if the ice and fire yin-yang well were exposed, it would be bad. Just like the currently sensational disappearance incident of the first prince in the Heaven Do Empire. Heaven Do Empire, Prince's residence. Inside the residence, there were carved beams and painted pillars, floors paved with gold bricks, and palace lanterns under the corridors shining all night long, reflecting a room full of jewels and treasures, a scene of extreme royal luxury. Prince Shui Xing, dressed in fine robes, paced back and forth in the spacious and luxurious hall. His brows were tightly locked, his expression anxious and uneasy, his fingertips unconsciously rubbing the jade pendant at his waist, every step carrying an unconcealable urgency. He was waiting for Douluo Bo's response. During this period, Douluo Bo had rarely shown his face. He had not seen this old poison Douluo for a long time. This time, having lowered his status to invite him, he did not know if that reclusive and solitary titled Douluo would actually help. And this matter concerned the future of the Heaven Do Empire, so Prince Shui Xing could not help but take it seriously. Shui Qing had been missing for over half a year, and even Emperor Shui Yi had given up searching. Seeing that the fourth Prince Shui Bang, whom he supported, was the only remaining seedling and would soon have a chance to take over the throne. Hey, Shui Qing actually returned at this time. Upon hearing this news, Prince Shui Xing only felt a great surge of ups and downs, almost fainting. Finally, a servant brought in a familiar dark green figure, and Prince Shui Xing breathed a sigh of relief. With poison Douluo, this titled Douluo expert, the chances of success for his plan would also be greater. Chapter 33, Successful Escape, Roadside Anomaly. In the ice and fire yin-yang well. Douluo Bo had left, and the entire ice and fire yin-yang well was left with only Fang Yuan, Douluo Yan, and Xiao Wu, who was tightly bound. Douluo Bo was also worried that Fang Yuan and Xiao Wu would join forces to resist, and that Yan would get hurt. For the old poison master, his granddaughter's safety was the most important thing. He directly poisoned both of them. He controlled the toxicity, ensuring they wouldn't die immediately. Although this trick was old, it was indeed very effective in most situations. At the very least, Xiao Wu, who was currently just a human body, collapsed on the spot. Although it wouldn't kill her outright, it was impossible for her to escape through the poisonous barrier surrounding the ice and fire yin-yang well under Douluo Yan's nose. After Douluo Bo left, Fang Yuan secretly surveyed the medicinal garden. Beside the spring where the ice and fire converged, a large, leafless pink flower was swaying its crystal-like petals. The Yushang Qiluo immortal herb itself was non-toxic, but the fragrance it emitted could neutralize all poisons. Within its range, any poison was ineffective, making it the king of the anti-poison domain. Sure enough, Douluo Bo had not taken that Yushang Qiluo immortal herb away. Although this immortal herb could neutralize his poison and save his life, in battle, this Yushang Qiluo immortal herb would also greatly reduce Douluo Bo's strength, rendering his green-scaled snake poison completely useless. He did not know that Fang Yuan was aware of the effects of this immortal herb. Moreover, with Yan guarding it, two people poisoned with severe toxins couldn't get close, so even if they knew, they couldn't do anything. This was originally a plan without any loopholes. But it just so happened that Fang Yuan possessed the vast sea cosmic shroud. After confirming that Douluo Bo wouldn't return for a short time, Fang Yuan's spirit power surged. Suddenly, and the vast sea cosmic shroud transformed into a pale blue stream of light in his palm. In an instant, the divine light spread, enveloping the entire ice and fire yin-yang well within the barrier. Not far away, Douluo Yan, with her purple hair and green eyes, her lower half, a snake tail, hidden among the spiritual plants, was concentrating on refining the power of ice and fire. The poisonous mist around her surged, but it was tightly restrained by this sudden spatial power, leaving her limbs, spirit power, and even her snake tail unable to move. She suddenly looked up, her green slit pupils shrinking, her eyes splitting with rage, but she could only freeze in place, watching helplessly as Fang Yuan walked closer step by step, and then Ignoring Du Guyan's gaze, which had almost become tangible, he lightly pinched his fingertips and precisely plucked the Yushang Qiluo immortal herb, which was glowing with a faint, exotic fragrance and was entirely pearly white. As he approached within 100 meters of the immortal herb, a faint, clear radiance washed over him, and the toxins in his body melted away layer by layer, slowly dissipating like ice and snow meeting the scorching sun. Du Guyan gritted her teeth, but couldn't even make a sound. She could only watch from within the restraints of the vast sea cosmic shroud as the other party used the immortal herb to neutralize the severe poison, yet she was helpless. After neutralizing the toxins, Fang Yuan did not hesitate. He immediately found Xiao Wu, retied her, as she had collapsed from the poison, and after confirming that she couldn't escape, he helped her detoxify. Time was urgent, and afterward, he immediately went to dig up the immortal herbs he could use, such as the coxcomb phoenix sunflower, the 8-petal immortal orchid, and so on. After digging, he immediately packed up the immortal herbs, carried Xiao Wu, spread his wings, and flew away, leaving Du Guyan with nothing but a retreating figure. That didn't look back. Actually, Fang Yuan felt a little regret. He could have used the immortal herbs that Du Guyan had consumed, too, right? Although because he had awakened the dark blue-silver emperor by consuming immortal herbs during the simulation, his current blue-silver emperor spirit already had the effects of the immortal herbs, such as fire immunity and water immunity, but how should he put it? Who would complain about having too many good things? And Du Guyan, who was immobilized by the vast sea cosmic shroud, had been ignored by Fang Yuan from beginning to end. Fang Yuan did not harm Du Guyan. In the future, if he happened to be caught by Du Gubo again, although having Du Guyan there might mean he would encounter some unspeakable things, at least he would be able to save his life. This could be considered a fallback for survival. Fang Yuan thought for a moment and decided to head to the blue-silver forest next. For Fang Yuan, who had now awakened the dark blue-silver emperor spirit, the blue-silver forest was an excellent place to cultivate, much better than the mimicry simulation devices in those spirit master academies. He had just come out of the sunset forest. The sun was already setting in the west, and the dampness of the forest still clung to his robes, carrying a faint, fishy scent peculiar to rotting vegetation. Fang Yuan raised his hand to wipe the sweat from his forehead, identified the direction, and walked toward the nearest town, intending to properly resupply. As he walked, he suddenly slowed his pace. Not far ahead, on the slope by the roadside, a crowd of people was gathered. Hoes rose and fell, shovels flew, and clods of earth were dug up and piled aside. Judging by the posture, they were working with great fervor. Fang Yuan just glanced at them indifferently, assuming they were ordinary farmers clearing land for cultivation. In this day and age, anyone with a bit of strength was willing to open up a few more fields and plant a few more crops. It was a common occurrence. He didn't take it to heart and continued walking along the roadside. But the further he walked, the more he felt something was wrong. The movements of those people were too ruthless. The hoes were swung down, not to turn the soil, but to chisel it. The shovels were inserted, not to loosen the ground, but to pry it, with mud splashing everywhere. This didn't look like clearing land, it looked more like venting anger. Fang Yuan couldn't help but take a few more looks. Only then did he realize there was nothing in the ground. No, it wasn't that there was nothing. Under their feet, clusters of fine grass were scattered. The blades of grass were slender and long, gleaming with a faint, deep blue-silver color under the setting sun. After being dug up by the roots, they were piled haphazardly aside. Some had already wilted, while others were still stained with wet mud. Blue-silver grass. He paused, his steps stopping involuntarily. The group of people in front of him were digging up grass. Fang Yuan stood there watching for a moment, and in the end, he couldn't help himself. He stepped closer. "What are you doing?" he asked curiously, as if it were a casual question. "Why are you digging up these blue-silver grass? Aren't they everywhere along the roadside?" The movements of those people did not pause in the slightest. They even became more forceful. The hose cut deeply into the soil, and with a violent pry, the blue-silver colored fine grass, roots and soil attached, was flung aside. One of them looked up, his eyes scanning Fang Yuan with a strange expression, from his forehead to his toes, and back to his face. That look wasn't like examining a passerby, but rather like looking at some rare curiosity. However, he didn't think too much about it. After all, although there were few people who didn't fear blue-silver grass, they weren't non-existent. You don't know, the man said, his voice a bit dry. He swallowed before continuing, I don't know what's wrong lately, whenever I see this blue-silver grass, I get the creeps. As he spoke, he glanced at the pile of dug-up grass by his feet. The blades of grass were quietly gleaming with a fine luster in the sunlight, but he looked away as if burned, his movements becoming even faster. It's not just me, many people in our area are like this. I can't say why, it's just. I feel uncomfortable looking at them, my heart feels tight, and I feel uneasy all over. It's better to just dig them all up, out of sight, out of mind. As he finished speaking, the people next to him chimed in. Yeah, I used to see this blue-silver grass all the time and didn't feel anything, but lately, I'm just a bit afraid of it. Yeah, my legs can't help but shake, it's really strange. Fang Yuan nodded, not asking any more questions. Chapter 34. Is it you? An angry Schwexing. Fang Yuan did not say anything more. Like an ordinary passerby, having satisfied his curiosity, he continued on his way. But his heart was far from calm. He was not stupid. This anomaly was clearly related to the simulation he had experienced not long ago. Right now, ordinary people were only in a state of loathing and hating blue-silver grass, they did not have the memories from the simulation. However, it was inevitable that some lucky ones would awaken all their memories and come looking for him. Although he was currently a normal human, not some 100,000-year blue-silver emperor in human form, and had nothing to do with the self from the simulation, it was better to be safe than sorry. Unless it was an emergency, he could not easily use the dark blue-silver emperor spirit. Just then, Fang Yuan felt a sudden, inexplicable tightening in his chest. He felt that the surrounding atmosphere was somewhat off. He subconsciously looked back at the bulging sack behind him, and his heart skipped a beat. Xiao Wu, why is it so quiet? Previously, when she was tied up and stuffed into the sack, even though she could not move, she would always struggle a little unwillingly, occasionally letting out soft, muffled groans. But now, the sack was terrifyingly quiet, without even the slightest movement. A thought suddenly flashed into Fang Yuan's mind. Could she have been suffocated to death in the sack? Fang Yuan shook his head, forcibly suppressing this thought. Impossible, absolutely impossible. That was a 100,000-year soft-bones rabbit spirit beast in human form. Even if she was only a level 10-something spirit master now, her vitality was far beyond that of an ordinary person. How could she possibly be suffocated to death so easily? Could it be that the antidote he gave her earlier had not fully cleared the poison, and the residual drug effect had caused her to fall into a coma? Various guesses surged in his mind as Fang Yuan carefully opened the sack. As soon as the sack was opened, he saw Xiao Wu lying quietly inside, her long hair scattered against her cheeks, her eyes hollow and lifeless, her entire face pale to the point of being almost transparent, and her whole body exuding a lifeless stillness. Fang Yuan hurriedly leaned down, his fingertips touching her neck, carefully observing her pupils and checking her breathing. Thankfully, she is still alive. The 100,000-year spirit ring was not lost. He had just let out half a sigh of relief when Xiao Wu in the sack suddenly moved. She lifted her small head very slowly, and those hollow eyes slowly turned toward Fang Yuan, staring at him blankly, as if she were trying hard to recognize the person in front of her, or perhaps trying to grasp some vague memory. There was no hatred, no fear, and no familiar liveliness in her eyes, only an impenetrable chaos and confusion. She stared at Fang Yuan blankly for a long time, so long that Fang Yuan once again had an ominous feeling. It cannot be. Suddenly, Xiao Wu opened her mouth softly, her voice as light as a feather, weak yet unusually clear as she asked, "What is your dream?" Fang Yuan's response was almost instinctive. Without a moment's thought or hesitation, he blurted out, "To become a god." Upon hearing this answer, Xiao Wu's lips trembled as she said, It is you." The figure of Fang Yuan in front of her gradually overlapped with the boy with long, silver-blue hair from her dream. In the central district of Heavendo City, the vermilion gates of Prince Shuizing's manor were tightly shut, with stone lions standing majestically on both sides. Inside the study, the light was dim, making the atmosphere feel even more heavy. Prince Shuizing wore a luxurious brocade robe, his expression solemn, his fingertips tapping unconsciously on the pear wood tabletop. Opposite him, Douluo Bo leaned back in his chair, wearing a green robe, looking casual and laid back, yet an unsettling aura faintly emanated from him, and his brows carried his habitual arrogance and aloofness. After hearing what Prince Shuizing requested, Douluo Bo's originally casual gaze suddenly sharpened, and he immediately wanted to refuse. Years ago, when he was in distress, he had been saved by Prince Shuizing. He did indeed owe Prince Shuizing a favor and had personally promised to do one thing for him in repayment. But he had made it clear when he promised, he would never get involved in the power struggles of the Heavendo imperial family, especially troublesome and deadly matters like the succession or the throne. He did not want to touch them at all. But how could Prince Shuizing easily give up? He leaned forward, his tone urgent and carrying a hint of earnestness as he urged, "Brother Douluo, I just want to ask you to take action and investigate this." Suddenly returned Shuizing to see if there is any problem. Shuizing had not appeared for so long, yet now he had returned to Heavendo City without any warning. There were too many suspicious points. Prince Shuizing's heart was already filled with doubts, and he was certain that this suddenly appearing Shuizing definitely had a problem. Once evidence was found, Prince Shui Beng, whom he had been secretly supporting, would still have a chance to compete for the succession. However, Prince Shuizing had limited power in his own hands. To quietly probe and investigate a prince who held a high position and had the sect master of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School as his teacher was something he could not possibly do with his own ability. In desperation, he had to swallow his pride and approach the poisoned Douluo Bo. As long as Douluo Bo was willing to act, even if he only found the slightest bit of something wrong or a single flaw, he would have full confidence in seizing the handle and ruthlessly trampling this nephew of his. But Douluo Bo had survived mountains of corpses and seas of blood, and had broken through. His bottleneck to become a titled Douluo, his wisdom and vision were far beyond that of ordinary spirit masters. Shuizing had been operating in the Heavendo Empire for many years, his influence deeply rooted, and on the surface, he had the sect master of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School, Fengji, as his teacher. Even if his disappearance had caused his influence to fluctuate, he was definitely not someone that he, Douluo Bo, could easily provoke. Once involved in this vortex of the throne, with his status as the poisoned Douluo, even if his strength was formidable enough to protect himself, it would inevitably implicate his granddaughter, Douluo Yan. Having figured this out, the last bit of casualness on Douluo Bo's face faded away completely, and he coldly and bluntly refused Prince Shuizing. "Prince, there is no need to say more. When I accepted your favor, it was already agreed, I would never interfere in any power struggles of the Heavendo imperial family. What you are asking for now has already crossed the line." His gaze deepened, carrying the pressure of a titled Douluo. "If there is a next time, this favor will be written off." Since things had reached this point, even if Prince Shuizing was unwilling, he could only swallow the words that had reached his lips. He knew that continuing to persuade him would be futile and would instead completely enrage this poisoned Douluo, leaving not even a shred of decency. He took a heavy breath, his face turning green and white, and finally, he just waved his hand stiffly, saying in a deep voice, "Fine, it was my lack of consideration this time, please do not blame me, Brother Douluo." Douluo Bo did not reply. He flicked his sleeves, turned around, and walked straight out of the study, his figure disappearing after a few leaps. Not until the oppressive feeling belonging to the titled Douluo had completely dissipated and the study returned to dead silence could Prince Shuizing no longer suppress the anger and frustration that had been building up in his chest. He suddenly raised his hand and smashed the warm teacup in his hand fiercely against the blue brick floor. Clang! The white porcelain teacup shattered upon impact, hot tea splashed everywhere, and broken porcelain shards scattered about. Chapter 35, Dissatisfied Shui Beng, Dark Blue Silver Emperor Seeds. As angry as Prince Shui-Xing was, he only dared to smash his cup to vent his frustration after Douluo had left. This was, after all, a world where strength reigned supreme. As his anger gradually subsided, Prince Shui-Xing slowly exhaled a breath of turbid qi. His originally tense face regained some of the composed demeanor befitting a member of the royal family. He raised his hand to straighten his slightly disheveled robes, though a trace of lingering gloom remained deep in his eyes. The servants waiting nearby saw this and immediately hurried into the hall with their heads lowered and bated breath, carefully cleaning up the mess on the floor without daring to make a single unnecessary sound. Just then, a series of slightly hurried footsteps sounded from outside the hall, and the fourth prince, Shui Beng, walked in impatiently. He had been well aware of today's events. Prince Shui-Xing, worried that Shui Beng was still young and his status sensitive, fearing that if he appeared rashly, it would only make Douluo more resistant, had simply had him wait for news in the adjacent side hall. As soon as Shui Beng stepped into the main hall, his gaze subconsciously swept across the floor. The shattered fragments of the white porcelain teacup were still scattered at the entrance, and the tea had long since soaked into the blue bricks, leaving a dark stain. With just one look, he understood everything. The plan had failed. An uncontrollable surge of anger welled up in his heart. Shui Beng furrowed his brows, looked at his uncle, and spoke with barely suppressed dissatisfaction. "Uncle, this Douluo is far too unappreciative." The more he thought about it, the angrier he became, feeling that the titled Douluo was arrogant, cold, and impervious to reason. Deep down, he secretly complained, if not for his uncle's intervention back then, Douluo would have long since perished at the hands of Spirit Hall. Having owed such a huge favor, now that he was merely being asked to help, to show so little face was simply ungrateful. Prince Shui-Xing listened quietly to Shui Beng's words, his brows slightly furrowed. Although he actually agreed with his nephew's thoughts in his heart, he slowly shook his head, his tone carrying a sense of helplessness and heaviness. A figure like Douluo is, after all, a genuine titled Douluo with an arrogant nature, unbound by worldly power. If not for that genuine life-saving favor from the past, let alone the royal family, even I would have absolutely no way to command him. Prince Shui-Xing paused here, his gaze darkening, and a sense of worry rose in his heart. Moreover, favors are the most precious things, and they are the least capable of withstanding consumption. Every time one is used, it thins by a fraction, every time it is consumed, it diminishes. P.S. Don't say I'm dumbing down Shui Beng. Although the original work writes that Shui Beng was pretending to be a playboy, his actions were truly terrible. In the imperial capital, he bullied men and women, acted recklessly, harassed Zhu Zuqing and was taught a lesson on the spot, and used his status as a prince to beat and scold commoners and bully low-level spirit masters, resulting in a terrible reputation. These could still be explained as acting to lower Shui Qinghei's guard. But mocking the Shrek group who had just arrived in Heaven Do City at the Academy Gate, and then after getting beaten up, going to his uncle Prince Shui-Xing to ask the titled poisoned Douluo to back him up, really, looking for a titled Douluo to back him up just because he got beaten up. He isn't Dugu Yan, did he really think of Douluo as a thug to be ordered around at will? Later, on the Jialing Pass battlefield, he gave blind orders, trusted Marshal Zhe Long too easily, and had the entire army launch a frontal assault on Jialing Pass, falling right into a Spirit Empire ambush. The Heaven Do army collapsed completely, with over 100,000 casualties, and Shui Beng was paralyzed with fear on the spot. Before entering the town, Fang Yuan disguised himself simply and used an alias. After being checked by the guards, he was able to enter the city directly. There was no need for commoners to pay to enter the city while spirit masters entered for free, as was the case in Douluo too. In the current period, both spirit masters and commoners entered the city for free. It was common knowledge, just like the free spirit awakening popularized across the entire continent. After entering the city, Fang Yuan specifically went to check the bulletin board. He did not see any wanted poster suspected of being for him, though the missing person notice was still there. However, with this missing person notice, age unknown, appearance unknown, everything unknown, only knowing the name, Fang Yuan, it was almost impossible to find him. His spirit awakening record at Spirit Hall was that of a trash spirit. Even if Bibi Dong of Spirit Hall awakened her memories and looked for Fang Yuan, there were so many people named Fang Yuan that she would likely investigate those with Spirit Master talent first, ignoring him, the Fang Yuan with a trash spirit. Moreover, while traveling, he always used an alias. Only those in the village knew his real name was Fang Yuan. Nearly a year had passed, he had grown quite a bit, and his appearance had changed significantly. Coupled with changes in his clothing and temperament, the villagers probably wouldn't recognize him anymore either. In short, even if those people awakened their memories, it would be very difficult to find him, right? At this moment, Fang Yuan suddenly remembered Du Guyan and Xiao Wu, who had recognized him at a glance, and suddenly he wasn't so confident anymore. Forget it, better to be careful. Fang Yuan's figure walked in front, and half a step behind him, Xiao Wu followed closely. Those eyes that were once always lively were now veiled in a layer of fear. Xiao Wu's steps were somewhat unsteady, and because she was lost in thought, her ankles had already been scratched by the sharp wild grass on the roadside, leaving thin, small wounds. Yet she was completely unaware, her whole being as if her soul had been extracted, utterly distracted. Just a short while ago, when Xiao Wu recognized Fang Yuan by instinct, Fang Yuan had completely stopped pretending. In Xiao Wu's panicked gaze, Fang Yuan simply raised his hand, and a thick, black spirit power, carrying countless tiny, seemingly ordinary grass seeds, surged straight toward her. She didn't even have time to resist before those grass seeds, as if possessing life, scrambled to burrow into her body, flowing along with her blood, and finally taking root in every corner of her limbs and bones. These were the seeds of the dark blue-silver emperor. Xiao Wu, who possessed simulated memories, of course recognized these grass seeds that had caused that living hell. Xiao Wu still clearly remembered that countless living beings, upon coming into contact with these, plain and unremarkable, grass seeds, were instantly drained of their flesh, life qi, and even their soul. Once full bodies withered at a speed visible to the naked eye, eventually turning into lifeless, grass frames, and becoming nourishment for the growth of the dark blue-silver emperor. She could clearly perceive that her life and death were entirely within a single thought of Fang Yuan. With just a single thought, these grass seeds would instantly awaken, madly plundering everything she had. She would die in incomparably painful and miserable agony, just like those people in her memories. Therefore, Xiao Wu dared not run, nor did she dare to resist. And Fang Yuan finally no longer had to worry about Xiao Wu taking the opportunity to stab him in the back. Chapter 36, Ning Fengji Tests, Shui Qing. Just as Fang Yuan finished counting the last batch of supplies and was preparing to set off for the blue-silver forest, the aristocratic district of Heaven Do City, 100 miles away, was already shrouded in a tense atmosphere. No one had expected that the first prince, Shui Qing, who had been missing for over half a year and was almost universally assumed to be in great danger by the imperial court, would return quietly without any warning. The news seemed to have grown wings, instantly sweeping through the entire imperial city. Those nobles and factions who had already secretly placed their bets and laid their chips on this eldest imperial prince were ecstatic for a moment, and their hearts finally relaxed. Yet, after the wild joy, a huge doubt immediately weighed on their minds. Where exactly had Shui Qing gone after being missing for so long? What had he done? Or was there some other ulterior motive? If he could not explain it clearly, even those who had supported him in the past would have to reconsider their stance, or even immediately withdraw to cut their losses. Among all those paying attention to this matter, Ning Fengji, as Shui Qinghei's teacher, was undoubtedly the most concerned and the one who most needed to find out the truth immediately. He was not only the sect master of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School but also an honored guest of the Heaven Do Empire's royal family. Every move Shui Qing made affected the interests and landscape of both the sect and the empire. Almost the moment he confirmed the news was true, Ning Fengji set aside all his affairs and personally visited Shui Qinghei's residence. Inside the first prince's mansion, after the doorman respectfully announced his arrival, Ning Fengji was led by an attendant through layers of courtyards, stepping all the way into the main hall. As soon as he stepped into the living room, Ning Fengji's gaze fell straight onto the main seat. A golden-haired youth sat there, posture upright, his appearance still as handsome and gentle as in his memory, his eyes lowered, leisurely brewing and pouring tea, his movements smooth as flowing water, exuding an innate elegance and nobility. That was indeed the appearance of Shui Qing, not changed in the slightest. Yet, the moment Ning Fengji saw him, his heart sank slightly. He knew his disciple too well. The former Shui Qing, as the first prince of the Heaven Do Empire, used elegance and humility to cover up his inner ambition. Facing him, the sect master of the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School and his teacher, he had always been respectful and humble, with impeccable manners. In the past, whenever he visited, Shui Qing would always rise to greet him personally, and after entering the hall, he would take the initiative to offer his seat, speaking with humility and acting with respect, never showing the slightest negligence. And not just towards him. In front of outsiders, Shui Qing had always been a model prince who treated subordinates with courtesy and was gentle and wise. Even when facing low-status ordinary spirit masters, he was always gentle and polite. This was the reputation Shui Qing had cultivated for many years, and it was also his sharp weapon for winning over people's hearts. But now, Ning Fengji stood in the center of the living room, looking at the golden-haired figure on the main seat. Shui Qing just slowly raised his eyes to look at him, the corners of his lips curling into a smile that was still gentle and humble, his gaze warm, just as harmless as in the past. But he remained firmly seated on the main seat from beginning to end, not standing up, not coming forward, not even showing a trace of respect. He just sat there, leisurely and indifferently, looking down at his teacher from a high position. The fingers hidden in Ning Fengji's sleeves curled almost imperceptibly, and his brows furrowed slightly at this moment. Something was wrong. After some perfunctory and polite small talk, the atmosphere in the living room gradually became heavy, and both of them tacitly entered the main topic. Ning Fengji picked up his teacup and took a light sip, then looked up at Shui Qing on the main seat. His tone sounded gentle, but every word hit the mark. Qing, you have been missing for several months without a trace. What exactly happened during this period? If you have any difficulties, just speak up, perhaps your teacher can help with something. He asked with concern, his gaze landing on Shui Qinghei's face, unwilling to let go of even the slightest detail. Qian Xunji, disguised as Shui Qing, naturally could not tell the truth. She sighed lightly, a look of helplessness and obscurity appearing on her face, and slowly fabricated the excuse she had long prepared. I have worried you, teacher. To tell you the truth, I accidentally encountered a mishap while trying to cultivate, and had no choice but to go into seclusion to heal, which is why I cut off contact with the outside world and was late to appear. Her words were spoken with genuine sincerity, and her expression carried just the right amount of exhaustion from surviving a disaster. Hearing this, Ning Fengji nodded slightly, his face immediately showing concern, and his voice softened further. So that's how it is. Is your injury completely healed now? Are there any lingering effects? But whether Ning Fengji believed it or not, no one knew. The two chatted for a while longer about the political situation, cultivation, and other matters, their words airtight without a single flaw. When Ning Fengji rose to leave and reached the hall door, he suddenly stopped, turned back to look at Shui Qing, and his tone became a bit more serious. Qing, now that you have returned, you must be careful in all matters. Especially, you must be wary of your fourth brother, Shui Beng. Seeing Shui Qing look over in confusion, Ning Fengji continued, in the years you were away, he was extremely active in the court, pulling in ministers and befriending nobles everywhere, his ambition undisguised. However, he is still impatient and clumsy in his actions. In terms of intelligence and means, he is not even a 10,000th of you and cannot make big waves, but you still need to guard against his petty tricks in the shadows. The Shui Qing played by Qian Xunji immediately showed an expression of instruction, smiled gently, bowed, and said, "Thank you for the reminder, teacher, the disciple will keep it in mind." After Ning Fengji left, two figures quietly appeared from the shadows like ghosts. Snake Lance Douluo and Poison Pig Douluo landed in the living room one after the other, their gazes immediately falling on Shui Qing, who was still sitting on the main seat, their expressions filled with undisguised concern and gravity. Previously, the young lord had an accident, and her condition was extremely unstable. Even the high priest had secretly given the order to prepare to abandon the Heaven Do Empire undercover plan, prioritizing the safety of the young lord. But no one expected that as soon as the young lord barely stabilized her condition, she insisted on returning to Heaven Do City to continue using the identity of Shui Qing. The current situation is no longer what it used to be. Shui Qing had been missing for a long time, and his sudden return was already full of suspicious points. This identity was no longer as safe as it was initially. The two of them took turns persuading her, but they could not stop the young lord's determination. Considering she had just recovered and they dared not stimulate her too much, the two-titled Douluo could only follow her wishes helplessly. Young lord. Snake Lance Douluo stepped forward, his brows locked, his tone full of worry. Ning Fengji was here just now, and this subordinate has been uneasy. This person is deep-thinking, shrewd, and cunning. That explanation you just gave, will he really believe it? Could he have already seen through the flaws? Concerning the young lord's safety, he dared not be careless in the slightest. Qian Xunji picked up the slightly cooled tea on the table and took a light sip, her golden hair falling down, covering the cold light that flashed in her eyes. She slowly put down the teacup, her tone calm. So what if he saw through the flaws? This old fox, Ning Fengji, has always prioritized benefits. He supports Shui Qing not because of the teacher-student relationship, but because I can bring enough benefits to his 7-treasure glazed tile school and make his position in the Heaven Do Empire more stable. As long as my chances of winning the succession are high enough, he will continue to stand on my side. She paused, the corners of her lips curling into an arc. Unless he can see through my true identity. But such a possibility is minimal. She had replaced the real Shui Qing at the age of 10, living, studying, and managing forces in the Heaven Do Empire under this identity, and it has been 6 full years to this day. In other words, from the first day Ning Fengji met Shui Qing, the person he knew was her, Qian Xunji. Even if her temperament and disposition are slightly different from the past now, the other party will only think that it is because Shui Qing encountered changes and hardships during his disappearance, causing a great change in his heart nature. He would absolutely never think that this first prince before him had been replaced by someone a long time ago. Chapter 37, Capturing Douluo Bo. Her fingertips unconsciously traced the rim of the warm teacup over and over. Qian Xunji lowered her eyelids, her thoughts drifting back to the list of Fang Yuan that Bibi Dong had given her not long ago. There were 5 people from the Star Luo Empire and 6 from the Heaven Do Empire, spanning all ages from old to young, both male and female. Among them, 8 possessed useless spirits and no innate spirit power, unable to even set foot on the most basic path of a spirit master. Bibi Dong had mobilized the power of Spirit Hall to search for them in secret, yet even so, 4 people on the list could not be found. The first Fang Yuan was a man, already 30 years old. Originally a spirit master of commoner origin, he had traveled alone to the extreme North Ice Plains for training many years ago. Since then, there had been no news of him. He had vanished into thin air. No one knew if he was buried in the ice and snow or had changed his name and gone into hiding, never to appear again. The second Fang Yuan. Thinking of this, Qian Xunji's fingertips paused slightly, complex and unspeakable emotions surging in her heart. That one was a female. At age 6, her spirit awakening revealed a black cat, not top tier, but certainly not useless. Yet, her cruel parents had sold her to slave traders for a pittance. After being auctioned off, she fell into the hands of a noble and became a servant, but in secret, she had to endure the noble's molestation and playthings. Later, she was abused by the noble's legal wife and eventually died a miserable death, not even leaving behind a complete corpse. The third Fang Yuan was a boy, only 10 years old. The village where he lived was slaughtered and looted by rogue spirit masters. After the catastrophe, the child had completely disappeared. The fourth Fang Yuan was also a child, only 7 years old. At the time of his spirit awakening, he was recognized as having a useless spirit, with not a shred of innate spirit power, destined to be mediocre his whole life. Yet, this child was proud and arrogant, unwilling to live a life of mediocrity. At such a young age, he left home alone to venture out into the world and had since vanished into the sea of people, with no one knowing if he was dead or alive. Qian Runshui had personally met all 7 Fang Yuans that Spirit Hall had recovered from the list. She tested them time and time again, but the result every single time was only disappointment. Not one of them was her A Yuan, the one she dreamed of and was desperate to find. The emptiness and anxiety in her heart piled up layer by layer. Qian Runshui could only comfort herself over and over in her mind. A Yuan is still alive, he must still be alive. He is just hidden in some corner that Spirit Hall cannot find, and the timing is just not right yet, she simply hasn't met him. Only with such repeated psychological suggestion could she barely stabilize her mind, which was on the verge of losing control, and forcibly suppress the mutation within her spirit caused by her agitated emotions. This time, she would never lose A Yuan again. She would give everything to keep him safe. As for Bibi Dong, at the thought of this woman, a thick, impenetrable darkness and baleful qi surged in the depths of Qian Runshui's eyes, and the air pressure around her plummeted. That sudden change caused Snake Lance Douluo and Porcupinefish Douluo, who were hiding in the shadows to protect her, to tremble in their hearts. The two appeared almost instantly, their expressions grave. Young Lord, please calm your anger. The two-titled Douluo hurriedly spoke to comfort her, their tones filled with urgency. Have you forgotten your promise to the High Priest to calm your mind and stabilize your emotions? Are you not still looking for that important person? You must not lose control at this moment. Thinking of A Yuan, the dark aura around Qian Runshui receded slightly. She slowly closed her eyes, forcibly suppressing the surging emotions back into the depths of her heart. When she opened her eyes again, she had recovered some of her usual coldness. She looked at the two elders, who were full of worry, and said softly, "My apologies, I lost my composure just now." But changing her tone, she immediately resumed her identity as the young lord of Spirit Hall, her voice brooking no doubt, "Do not tell grandfather about today's events." She knew Qian Daoliu's personality too well. If her grandfather knew that her so-called recovery was all just a facade of calm, and that the hidden danger within her had never been eradicated, but rather had become increasingly severe due to her obsession, the old man would surely force her back to the elders' hall to be kept under house arrest, never allowing her to come out to look for A Yuan again. Porcupinefish Douluo and Snake Lance Douluo exchanged glances, their faces revealing bitter, conflicted smiles. The young lord was clearly putting them in a difficult position. If they kept this from the high priest and something were to actually happen to the young lord, who among them could bear the consequences? Qian Runshui saw through their hesitation at a glance. Her brows chilled slightly, and the dark aura that hadn't fully dissipated around her began to churn faintly again, making the two-titled Douluo's hearts tighten. The young lord was currently in an unstable state, they absolutely must not provoke her further. The two had no choice but to nod helplessly, agreeing for the moment to stabilize Qian Runshui's emotions. It was just that they had already quietly made up their minds in their hearts. When a suitable opportunity arose, they would definitely report the situation of the young lord's loss of control today to the high priest Qian Daoliu truthfully. The anxiety and obsession in the depths of Qian Runshui's eyes settled down bit by bit, transforming back into the calmness and sharpness that belonged to a successor of the angel legacy. She knew very well that searching frantically in her current anxious state would make it impossible to find A Yuan. A-Yuan's appearance and identity in this lifetime were all unknown, and even his name might not still be Fang Yuan. Searching like this was just like looking for a needle in a haystack. Her return to Heaven Do City this time was not a momentary impulse. First, she needed to find Dugu Bo and enter the ice and fire yin-yang well. In her fragmented memories, it was A Yuan who had told her the secret of the ice and fire yin-yang well, where countless peerless immortal herbs grew. In reality, A Yuan might also be attracted to that treasure land and go there to seek an opportunity. That was one of the key clues she currently had regarding A Yuan. Second, she needed to use the identity of Shui Qing to eliminate Emperor Shui Yi in advance and ascend the throne as the new emperor of the Heaven Do Empire. Only by holding supreme power and unifying the continent could she mobilize the strength of the entire continent to search for people and find A Yuan faster. Third, she truly could not stay in Spirit City for another moment. Bibi Dong was her mother, but also the enemy who had caused the death of her beloved. Seeing her every day, yet being unable to even take revenge, she could only watch helplessly as the other party sat high on the throne of the Supreme Pontiff of Spirit Hall. That suppression and hatred were almost tearing her apart. If she stayed any longer, she feared she would be driven mad by this endless torment first. Qian Runshui's voice had returned to its usual cold majesty. She raised her eyes to look below and asked indifferently, "How is the search for Douluo proceeding?" Upon hearing this, Snake Lance Douluo secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The young lord had finally returned to her usual self, no longer in that paranoid, dark, and emotionally unstable state. He hurriedly bowed and replied, reporting to the young lord. "According to your instructions, we have investigated and found that Douluo has returned to Heaven Do City and has met with Prince Shui Xing." Qian Runshui nodded slightly, her eyes cold and piercing. "Capture him and bring him to see me." Snake Lance Douluo and Porcupinefish Douluo exchanged glances, both feeling some confusion in their hearts. They truly did not understand why the young lord, who had always had such high standards, would suddenly be so concerned about Douluo, who was rumored to be the weakest titled Douluo. But the two did not dare to show the slightest defiance, fearing that they would provoke this emotionally unstable young lord again. They immediately bowed their heads and respectfully replied, "Yes, young lord." Chapter 38, The Madness of Bibi Dong. While Qian Runshui was still laying out her plans step by step, Bibi Dong, relying on the ruthlessness and sophistication accumulated over several lifetimes of reincarnation, had already made a preemptive judgment. From the moment she awakened the memories of her past lives, she immediately made up her mind to capture Douluo at once and wait like a rabbit waiting by a stump at the ice and fire yin-yang well for a yuan to walk right into her trap. But fate played a cruel trick. By the time she ordered the capture, Douluo had already quietly left Heaven Do City with his granddaughter, Douluo Yan, and headed straight back to the Sunset Forest. Bibi Dong immediately dispatched troops to rush to the Sunset Forest to search, but that forest had rugged terrain and was shrouded in thick fog. Even with the strength of Spirit Hall, the progress of the search was maddeningly slow. At that moment, intense regret surged in Bibi Dong's heart. In her past life, her heart and eyes were filled only with Fang Yuan. Even though she had long known of the existence of the ice and fire yin-yang well, she had never truly paid it any mind. Now that she had awakened her memories, she couldn't even recall the exact location of that treasure land, missing the best opportunity to seize the initiative. As time passed, the memories of the second, third, and fourth lifetimes flooded into her mind like a tide, pressing down on her until she could almost not breathe. Every time she remembered the things she had done to Fang Yuan in her past life, Bibi Dong felt like she was going insane with pain. In her first lifetime, she was the most dazzling and pure young girl in Spirit Hall. She had grown up with Fang Yuan since childhood. Both possessed innate full spirit power and twin top-tier spirits, their talent surpassing everyone in Spirit Hall. But Fang Yuan was always one step ahead of her in cultivation, always walking before her, draped in holy light, the saint. Revered by all. In the depths of Bibi Dong's heart, she and he were a match made in heaven, destined to be partners who would become gods side by side. She had once put aside all her pride, crying and begging her teacher, Qian Xunji, until she finally obtained a marriage contract. But even though she had rightfully become the saint's fiancé, Fang Yuan still treated her with the same gentle courtesy as before, yet remained distant and indifferent. She used every means to stay by his side, acting as his junior sister, teammate, and sparring partner, but in those clear, transparent eyes, her image was never truly reflected, only cultivation was. Until one day, she heard Fang Yuan softly speak of his dream. He wanted to become a god. Not long after, Fang Yuan left Spirit Hall without a sound. Qian Xunji refused to say where he had gone, leaving her to suffer in anxiety day and night. It was during this lonely and painful time that Bibi Dong met Yu Shaogang. That man became the beginning of her lifelong tragedy. At that time, her heart was entirely filled with Fang Yuan, with no one to confide in. After meeting Yu Shaogang, a friend with similar interests, she poured out all the admiration, unwillingness, grievances, and depression in her heart to him all at once. Yu Shaogang had already fallen for Bibi Dong, who possessed peerless talent, breathtaking beauty, and a touch of naivety and innocence. The two grew closer with every conversation, and Bibi Dong trusted him more and more, even going so far as to tell Yu Shaogang everything about her deep, obsessive love for the saint without any reservation. Watching the young girl whose eyes were filled with another person, jealousy grew wildly in Yu Shaogang's heart. Faced with Bibi Dong's distress, he feigned thoughtfulness and offered a seemingly harmless idea. You might as well try getting closer to me to test him and make him jealous. Yu Shaogang's plan was shrewd, as long as the Saint Fang Yuan saw Bibi Dong and himself inseparable, he would surely lose his composure in anger. At that point, he could seize the opportunity to step in and replace him in Bibi Dong's heart. Others might not have agreed to such an absurd plan from Yu Shaogang, but the innocent and naive Bibi Dong of that time agreed to it. But reality slapped everyone hard in the face. He never expected that. Fang Yuan not only felt no jealousy or anger, but instead used this opportunity to cleanly and decisively dump Bibi Dong, publicly annulled the engagement, and then left without looking back, disappearing completely from the continent. This departure lasted for several years. When he returned, Fang Yuan was already a titled Douluo, bearing a god's trial, radiant and glorious. Even Qian Xunji smiled and asked him if he wanted to leave behind offspring on the continent, having even prepared women for him. The series of blows left Bibi Dong stunned. The fiancé she adored had taken the initiative to annul their engagement and abandon her because of her own foolish testing. She had waited bitterly for years, traveled across the continent, and even entered Slaughter City, surviving by a hair's breadth, only to be met with the news that he was going to have offspring with another woman. Bibi Dong already had an extreme, paranoid, and ruthless personality, and with the whispers of the Rakshasa god seducing her day and night, she completely turned dark. She joined forces with the Rakshasa god to stab the saint she loved to the point of madness in the back. Initially, she only wanted to turn the saint into her own saint, imprisoning him by her side forever, even if it meant breaking his wings and locking him in a cage. She didn't want to lose him again. But she hadn't expected that the Rakshasa god would actually kill Fang Yuan. Because of her own actions, her lover died a miserable death. By the second lifetime, when Bibi Dong awakened her reincarnation memories again, she was no longer the young girl who would pour out her heart over love, but the supreme pontiff of Spirit Hall, firmly seated on the throne, holding the power of life and death, cold and ruthless. She clearly knew the trajectory of her fate in this lifetime. In this life, there was no such Saint Fang Yuan, draped in holy light, whom she loved to the point of madness. Her personality became even more insane and dark, with only the desire for power and destruction left in her eyes. She had heard the name Fang Yuan from her daughter, Qian Runshui. However, that was just a lowly slave by Qian Runshui's side. Bibi Dong initially thought it was just an ant with the same name, not linking it in the slightest to the holy and dazzling Spirit Hall saint from her memories. Moreover, the Fang Yuan of this lifetime was as different from the first as heaven and earth. The first lifetime was a holy, pure saint unstained by dust. This lifetime was a bewitching, evil-tempered nine-tailed fox, the complete opposite of the beam of light in her memory. At that time, Qian Runshui was moody and mentally unstable because of this slave. In Bibi Dong's eyes, Fang Yuan was a hidden danger that had to be removed. She did not hesitate in the slightest and killed the slave named Fang Yuan with her own hands. Until, in Fang Yuan's final moments, in those bewitching fox eyes, the last obsession was still not a desire for survival or unwillingness, but a fixation on becoming a god. That sense of familiarity, etched into her soul, made Bibi Dong freeze in place, as if struck by lightning. This bewitching nine-tailed fox slave was actually a Yuan. It was the saint she had loved for a lifetime and destroyed for a lifetime. The moment she recognized the truth, Bibi Dong completely broke down. In the previous life, it was her backstabbing that indirectly led to Fang Yuan being killed by the Rakshasa god. In this life, it was she who killed him personally. With the memories of 2 lifetimes, she had twice personally pushed her lover to his death. The third lifetime. In the third lifetime, fate finally gave her a chance to grasp him. In this lifetime, Bibi Dong awakened her memories at the Advanced Spirit Master competition, and relying on the obsession of 2 lifetimes, she recognized Fang Yuan in the crowd at the very first moment. No testing, no missing out. Thus, she used all her power to forcibly bring Feng Yuan back, locking him in that secluded secret chamber. No outside disturbances, no obsession with becoming a god, no coveting by others. In this lifetime, she finally achieved the perfection she desired in her heart. Imprisoning him for life, possessing everything about him, and never letting him leave her side for even a step. Even if it meant never seeing the light of day, even if it was twisted and extreme, as long as he was there, she would be at peace. Unfortunately, she hadn't expected that Tang San, a guy she hadn't even deigned to look at, would actually become a god and, joining forces with that guy Du Guyan, defeat her, and then kill A Yuan to take revenge on her for killing that rabbit. By the fourth lifetime, Bibi Dong, carrying the memories of 3 lifetimes, searched frantically for traces of Feng Yuan. Even though the immortal herbs at the ice and fire yin-yang well had all been plucked, no matter how she searched, she could not find any information related to Feng Yuan. Perhaps, in this lifetime, Feng Yuan simply did not exist in that world. The killing intent boiled in her heart. She intended to overturn this world with her own hands and destroy this world that lacked him. Just at the critical moment of the final battle, a monstrous dark spirit power suddenly surged between heaven and earth, and an aura, so familiar it was etched into her soul, appeared. Feng Yuan appeared. In this lifetime, he was no longer a holy light saint, not a bewitching 9-tailed fox, and not even a mortal body. He appeared in the form of a 100,000-year dark blue-silver emperor, his body wrapped in endless dark power. Upon appearing, he triggered a cataclysm in heaven and earth, sacrificing billions of living beings, using the endless energy of life as firewood and the power of the dark blue-silver emperor as his foundation, acting in a heaven-defying manner, attempting to become a god in one step. Bibi Dong stood in the midst of the sky-filling darkness, looking at that figure who was both familiar and strange, and then watched with her own eyes as he was smashed to pieces by the heavenly tribulation. Chapter 39, I shouldn't have been soft-hearted back then. Bibi Dong had already calculated this 1,000 times in her heart. This time, she had no way of knowing what A Yuan's true identity or appearance was, but she knew better than anyone, A Yuan's soul-deep desire to become a god. The path to becoming a god was full of elusive opportunities, and the ice and fire yin-yang well, a treasure land capable of helping a spirit master be reborn, was one of the most heaven-defying places of all. It was absolutely impossible for A Yuan to miss this precious land. Upon receiving the news that Du Gubo had appeared, Bibi Dong was unwilling to wait even a moment longer. On the outskirts of the sunset forest, the sky had just darkened. Du Gubo had just emerged from Prince Shui Xing's residence, his arrogance as poison Douluo not yet reined in, when he suddenly felt the air around him stagnate. A tremendous pressure locked him in place. The air suddenly stagnated. A figure, dark as ink, slowly stepped out from the darkness. Bibi Dong wore a suit of cold, pitch-black metal armor. The surface of the armor gleamed with a cold, hard light, its lines sharp as knives. The clean lines of the chest and waist armor outlined her tall, dignified figure, giving her an extremely oppressive presence that exuded the coldness and inviolability of a superior. Behind her, a long cape made of black and gold fabric fluttered without wind. Her signature long, purplish-red hair was tied up high, looking neat and beautiful, with a few stray strands hanging by her cheeks, making her stunning yet cold face appear even more intimidating. Du Gubo's expression changed abruptly, and the hairs all over his body stood on end. He recognized the woman before him, the Spirit Hall Supreme Pontiff, Bibi Dong. Looking at her current posturing, she certainly hadn't come with good intentions. Du Gubo's pupils shrank, and his first reaction was to put up a fight and flee. He was, after all, a dignified titled Douluo, the poison Douluo who shook the continent, wasn't he? But when his gaze swept over the 2 familiar figures beside Bibi Dong, he felt only despair. On one side was Chrysanthemum Douluo Yuguan, and on the other was Ghost Douluo Gui Mei. 2 titled Douluo elders stood silently, one on the left and one on the right. Du Gubo also fell silent. If it were only Bibi Dong, he might have been able to try and escape, but with the addition of Chrysanthemum Douluo and Ghost Douluo, a pair of titled Douluos with a spirit fusion skill, his chances of escaping were near zero. He was merely a titled Douluo who played with poison. What right did he have to make the Spirit Hall Supreme Pontiff lead a team personally, and even bring 2 titled Douluos along to surround and capture him? Although he had an old grudge with Yu Guan, that minor conflict was far from enough to alarm the Spirit Hall Supreme Pontiff. Furthermore, Yu Guan himself did not have the qualifications to ask Bibi Dong to take action. The next moment, Douluo Bo understood the terror of this lineup. Chrysanthemum and Ghost Douluo exchanged a glance, their spirit rings rising simultaneously, and the power of their domain instantly spread out. Polarized static domain. Once this control system spirit fusion skill, which could even imprison a titled Douluo, took shape, Douluo Bo's entire body stiffened. His spirit power, spirit abilities, and physical body were all firmly locked in place. He couldn't even move a single finger. The dignified poison Douluo was completely powerless to resist. Just then, 2 rapid sounds of breaking air arrived from afar. Snake Lance Douluo and Porcupinefish Douluo landed. Upon seeing the scene before them, both men wore expressions of embarrassment and awkwardness. They had been ordered by Qian Xunji to come specifically to capture Douluo Bo. But now, the person had already been captured by Bibi Dong and her team a step ahead of them. The 2 titled Douluos exchanged glances, then steeled themselves to step forward and bow to Bibi Dong. Your Excellency Supreme Pontiff, we have been ordered by the young lord of the Elders' Hall to come and apprehend Douluo Bo. We wonder if your Excellency might hand him over for us to take back. Their words were spoken with extreme caution, and even they themselves had no confidence. The 2 were muttering in their hearts, what exactly had Douluo Bo done? How could it be that the Supreme Pontiff acted personally on one side, while the young lord ordered his capture on the other? They also knew clearly that, relying on just the 2 of them, it was impossible to snatch someone from Bibi Dong's hands. Unless the High Priest Qian Daoliu arrived in person, no one could stop this Supreme Pontiff. Bibi Dong did not even spare them a glance, as if those 2 titled Douluos did not exist. She merely raised her hand indifferently, and with a pull of her spirit power, she lifted the imprisoned Douluo Bo into the air. Without a word of explanation, she turned and flew off into the depths of the sunset forest, breaking through the air. Snake Lance Douluo and Porcupinefish Douluo froze in place, unable to advance or retreat, and could only watch helplessly as the Supreme Pontiff's figure disappeared into the depths of the dense forest. On the other side, after Fang Yuan left, Douluo finally regained control of her body. She chased after him almost subconsciously, but the flight speed of A Yuan's bright Phoenix Martial Soul, combined with the 100,000-year Blue-Silver Emperor Spirit Bone ability, made it so she couldn't even find his back as she chased. In the end, Douluo could only return to the ice and fire yin-yang well, full of unwillingness. A-Yuan had escaped. Where would he go? Where would she have to go to find him again? Douluo gazed at the empty ice and fire yin-yang well, her mind a blank. The A-Yuan she knew had always been dull and dazed, with a mind so simple one could see right through it at a glance. Besides, burying himself in cultivate and caring exceptionally for delicious food, he almost didn't care about anything else and had no ulterior motives. In the past, she could guess where he would go next or what he would do just by thinking about it. Moreover, she clearly remembered that A Yuan was originally from the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile School. She knew exactly who his parents were and where the sect was. But now, everything had changed. The current A Yuan's appearance was no longer what she remembered, his temperament was worlds apart, and that dazzling and sharp bright Phoenix Martial Soul had completely replaced the Seven Treasure Glazed Tile Pagoda from her memories. Aside from the fact that he was still obsessed with cultivate and single-mindedly focused on becoming stronger, Douluo realized that she knew almost nothing about the current A Yuan. Gazing at the empty and silent herb garden, Douluo's expression sank completely, with gloom swirling in her eyes. As expected, I shouldn't have been soft-hearted back then. Douluo planned to wait for her grandfather, Douluo Bo, to return before discussing their next steps. She knew very well that her grandfather, Douluo Bo, had gone out this time because he had been invited to Heaven Do City by Prince Shui Xing. Thinking of that uncle and nephew pair, Prince Shui Xing and Shui Beng, Douluo's already terrible mood sank to rock bottom. Relying on the favor he had done for her grandfather in his early years, Prince Shuixing had been using the titled Douluo's reputation to swagger about all these years, openly and secretly gathering influence and vying for the throne for Shui Bang. In her memories, it would not be many years before this person would intensify his efforts, making her grandfather personally protect Shuixing and Shui Bang, dragging her grandfather completely into the power vortex of the Heaven Do imperial family. And this was precisely what she could not tolerate the most. Once her grandfather stayed in Heaven Do City to protect those two for the sake of repaying the favor, everything she had been planning in secret would be completely ruined. Thinking of this, Du Guyan took a deep breath, and a trace of coldness flashed across her eyes once again. However, this time, with her warning in advance, her grandfather should not easily agree to those excessive demands from Prince Shuixing as he had in her memories. Chapter 40, The Submitting Blue-Silver King. In the Blue-Silver Forest. Fang Yuan had traveled day and night, 10 full days without sleep or rest, and finally arrived at the outer perimeter of this forest dominated by blue-silver grass. But the moment he stepped into its territory, he keenly sensed something was wrong. This land of life, which should have been vibrant and filled with blue-silver grass, now exuded a strange sense of oppression and silence. The blue-silver forest was fundamentally dominated by endless blue-silver grass. The forest was not entirely silent. Usually, it was inhabited by many gentle, small spirit beasts, blue-winged sparrows, gray squirrels, crystal-armored beetles, and so on. They had always lived in peace with one another, minding their own business, forming a peaceful and tranquil ecosystem. But recently, this peace had been completely shattered. Those originally docile small spirit beasts, as if their minds had been affected by something, had all gone mad. They no longer foraged peacefully, but instead frantically trampled and bit the blue-silver grass around them. Even though blue-silver grass was not their food, they would desperately pull it up by the roots and wantonly destroy it. Large swaths of blue-silver grass withered and died, their life force constantly dissipating. The Blue-Silver King, who presided over this place, was extremely distressed by this. The blue-silver grass were his foundation and his people. The more lush the blue-silver grass throughout the forest, the more powerful his blue-silver domain became, and his own strength would become increasingly stable. Now that his people were being slaughtered before his eyes, he naturally could not sit idly by. He could only intervene time and again, clearing out those mindless, rampaging spirit beasts one by one. And because of this, when Fang Yuan truly stepped into the blue-silver forest, only silence remained. The chirping of insects and birds that once existed had vanished without a trace. The entire forest was terrifyingly quiet, so quiet that he could hear his own heartbeat and breathing. Fang Yuan stood at the outer perimeter of the blue-silver forest, no longer holding anything back. In an instant, a cold, dark spirit power, carrying the pressure of an emperor, erupted from within him. The dark blue-silver emperor spirit, completely released. Strange stalks of blue-silver grass broke through the ground. The primary tone of their leaves was a deep blue-gold, but they were entwined with ink-like black lines. Faint golden imperial patterns flowed between the leaf veins, with blue, gold, and black colors interwoven, exuding an aura that was both noble and evil. The moment they appeared, they grew wildly, instantly covering the ground around Fang Yuan, forming a stark contrast with the ordinary blue-silver grass nearby. And those ordinary blue-silver grass that had been growing quietly, as if feeling a supreme summons, all voluntarily bent their leaves. Like subjects bowing to a king, they crowded in layer upon layer around this unique dark blue-silver emperor. And at the very same instant the dark blue-silver emperor appeared. In the deepest part of the blue-silver forest, the core area. The Blue-Silver King, who had been shrouding the entire forest with his mental force, suddenly sensed the disturbance here. His mental force instantly condensed, transforming into a semi-transparent, aged phantom. When he saw the Blue-Silver Emperor exuding attributes of devouring and darkness, the Blue-Silver King's entire mental form trembled violently, his eyes surging with unbelievable shock. What is happening? The Blue-Silver Emperor of this generation has actually appeared. But why is this aura so dark, carrying an evil so dense it cannot be dissolved? What shocked him even more was that this bloodline fluctuation was not a continuation of the previous blue-silver Emperor Yin's bloodline at all. And the blue-silver king's gaze fell upon Fang Yuan, carefully examining this youth with a human body. A thought appeared in his mind, one that left him almost unable to believe it. The blue-silver Emperor of this generation, actually, awakened in a human. How is this possible? The blue-silver Emperor lineage has been the royalty among plant spirit beasts since ancient times. It has never appeared in a human. But that incredibly clear imperial pressure, that aura that made all blue-silver grass instinctively submit, could not possibly be fake. No amount of doubt or shock could suppress the blue-silver king's mission, passed down through generations. The blue-silver king suppressed his surging emotions. As the guard and guide who had protected the blue-silver emperor for countless years, he did not choose to just watch. The next moment, the blue-silver king's mental form silently appeared before Fang Yuan. With a tone carrying uncontrollable solemnity and doubt, he asked, "Who exactly are you?" Fang Yuan raised his eyes, feeling the joy and feedback from these blue-silver grass, and answered in a good mood, "Fang Yuan." The blue-silver king asked again, his tone urgent, "Fang Yuan, then how exactly did you awaken the blue-silver emperor? Your bloodline is not the legacy of the previous blue-silver emperor at all." This time, Fang Yuan did not answer. He only slightly raised his eyes, and the dark blue-silver emperor aura, interwoven with blue, gold, and black colors, around him suddenly condensed, directly shrouding the blue-silver king's mental form. "No need to ask more. In the name of the blue-silver emperor, I command you to immediately begin the ritual and condense a spirit ring for me." Fang Yuan knew the special nature of the blue-silver emperor. It did not require hunting spirit beasts. Relying solely on the vast life force of the endless blue-silver grass, it could condense a special spirit ring that could grow alongside his cultivation, also known as a life-bound spirit ring. And precisely because this spirit ring could continuously evolve with his strength, the order in which spirit rings were obtained was no longer important. He also did not need to wait until level 50 like Tang San, when his body strength could withstand the impact brought by the awakening, to awaken the blue-silver emperor and condense a life-bound spirit ring. The blue-silver king jolted, instinctively wanting to submit. But he still forced himself to ask one final question. "Great Your Majesty, my blue-silver clan is willing to acknowledge you as our master from now on, to serve as subjects for generations, and to protect you forever. Are you willing to forever shelter us, your people, and protect the blue-silver clan?" Fang Yuan did not hesitate in the slightest, his tone crisp and firm, "I am willing." The blue-silver king felt a sense of relief and immediately bowed. "Subordinate blue-silver king, pays respects to Your Majesty, the blue-silver emperor." The suppression of the bloodline was, after all, a decree carved into the bones of the blue-silver clan. Even though the blue-silver emperor before him had a strange aura and an unfamiliar bloodline, and even though the blue-silver king still had thousands of doubts in his heart, the blue-silver king could not disobey that command originating from the emperor. Moreover, he knew in his heart that even if he refused, Fang Yuan, who had already awakened, could still lead the ritual and condense a life-bound spirit ring solely by his own blue-silver emperor will. With this thought, the blue-silver king no longer hesitated. His semi-transparent mental phantom trembled slightly, and his vast mental force surged out like a tidal wave, instantly shrouding the entire blue-silver forest. An invisible will spread to every inch of land in the forest. The next moment, the blue-silver grass covering the mountains and plains swayed gently, and countless fine, stardust-like blue-silver light spots appeared on their leaves. That was the purest life origin of the blue-silver grass. Carrying a warm and majestic life force, it drifted up from billions of plants, converging into streams of light that rushed toward Fang Yuan, vying to be the first. The light spots fell like rain, covering his whole body, then slowly seeped into his body. Fang Yuan closed his eyes, quietly feeling that warm, gentle, yet vast and boundless life force. It was like sinking into a warm sea of life, and his entire body was gently wrapped, nourished, and reshaped. The dark blue-silver emperor stretched wildly beneath his feet, greedily accepting all of this, as the black, blue, and gold patterns flowed ceaselessly on the leaves. Chapter 41, Life Spirit Ring. The life spirit ring of the dark blue silver emperor spirit, apart from its heaven-defying special growth potential, also concealed a trait capable of making all spirit masters envious to the point of madness. It could precisely perceive the host's current physical tolerance limit and autonomously condense a spirit ring of an age that perfectly matched it, fundamentally eliminating the risk of exploding and dying from power overload when attaching a spirit ring to a second spirit too early. This spirit ring was naturally capable of automatically adapting to the host's physique. As their cultivation realm continued to have a breakthrough, its age could also rise infinitely without the slightest bottleneck or shackle. The next moment, a completely pitch-black spirit ring, flowing with a dim, dark luster, slowly circled and condensed around Fang Yuan, finally forming steadily. It was shockingly a black spirit ring with a full 30,000-year age. One must know that at this moment, Fang Yuan's spirit power was already stabilized at level 56. Moreover, having refined and completed the fusion of a 100,000-year blue-silver emperor right leg bone, his physical body strength and life foundation had long since far surpassed those of the same rank spirit king, and were even sufficient to compare with an ordinary spirit emperor. The spirit ability bestowed by this 30,000-year spirit ring was named Life Parasite. When the spirit ability was activated, the blue-silver grass seeds on the enemy would grow roots, silently parasiting onto the enemy's body, crazily devouring their life force to grow wildly, while simultaneously firmly imprisoning and controlling the enemy, rendering them unable to move. This move was precisely the spirit ability Fang Yuan had previously obtained during his simulation deductions. And the truly terrifying core of this spirit ability went far beyond control and devouring. The special nature of the blue-silver emperor allowed Fang Yuan to nourish himself entirely with these dark blue-silver grass that had grown wildly from the parasite. Having obtained a new skill, he naturally had to test its effects first, so Fang Yuan began testing the spirit ability's effects on a large tree nearby. Meanwhile, the blue-silver king witnessed this scene with its own eyes. In just an instant, a towering ancient tree was sucked dry by those dark blue-silver grass that had wound around it, permeated with a dark aura. Its branches and leaves withered, its trunk rotted, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a pile of lifeless, withered wood. And after those dark blue-silver grass, gorged on life force, were completely absorbed by Fang Yuan with a single thought, the spirit power within his body actually rose slightly, showing a small increase. Witnessing this scene, the blue-silver king's originally composed face completely froze, filled with dullness. It had guarded the blue-silver emperor lineage for countless years, and had never seen, nor ever imagined, that the new generation of the blue-silver emperor would be so different. As a guardian who had served and protected the blue-silver emperor for generations, even if shocked in its heart, the blue-silver king would never utter a single word of disrespect toward the blue-silver emperor. Even though the previous blue-silver emperor had sacrificed itself for a human and died, it had not therefore harbored hatred toward Tang San, who was half human and half spirit beast. Now, facing this brand new blue-silver emperor who walked the path of darkness, it still adhered to its original intention, without any disloyalty. In the beliefs of the blue-silver king, for a subject to be loyal to the emperor and to make sacrifices for the emperor was inherently right and proper, a matter of course. On the other side, Bibi Dong had already brought Douluo Bo into the Sunset Forest. Although Douluo Bo was currently firmly controlled by the other party, he remained tough. And refused to reveal detailed information about the Ice and Fire Yin-Yang Well. Inside the Ice and Fire Yin-Yang Well, not only were immortal herbs and a transformed 100,000-year soul beast hidden, but also his granddaughter, Douluo Yan, whom he regarded as his life. Once someone like Bibi Dong broke into it, given her methods and heart nature, the fate of the grandfather and granddaughter could be imagined. Bibi Dong had always acted fiercely and decisively, and at this moment, she was not dragging her feet in the slightest. She casually lit a blazing torch, the flames dancing ceaselessly in the dense forest. "If you don't lead the way," Bibi Dong's voice was as cold as ice, "I will burn this forest down with one fire." The Sunset Forest was naturally dense with vegetation. Once a fire started, relying on the wind and the density of the trees, it could sweep through the entire deep area in an instant. Douluo Yan did not have a flying spirit ability. Once trapped in a sea of fire, there was absolutely no possibility of escape. Douluo Bo's heart tightened, and his face immediately revealed a look of shock and anger, but in his heart, he secretly breathed a sigh of relief. His granddaughter had long since taken an immortal herb from the ice and fire yin-yang well and possessed a fire-immune physique. Ordinary flames could not hurt her at all. Therefore, while he appeared panicked, he was actually still at ease, only intending to prevaricate with the other party. But how could this little thought of his hide from Bibi Dong, who possessed the memories of 4 lifetimes and a deep mind? She saw through Douluo Bo's calculations at a glance, sneering endlessly in her heart. She was also somewhat surprised that in this lifetime, Douluo Yan would have taken the immortal herb so early and obtained a fire-immune physique. But she had so many methods, how could she be stumped by this small change? A spirit hall spirit master who had long been standing by stepped forward in response. Under Douluo Bo's furious gaze, the spirit master slowly paced around him in a circle, then immediately activated a spirit ability. A pale cyan tracking aura instantly locked onto the direction and sped toward the exact location of the ice and fire yin-yang well. Bibi Dong snorted coldly, picked up the immobilized Douluo Bo with one hand, and led the group to follow closely behind. In less than half a day, the group had arrived at the outer perimeter of the ice and fire yin-yang well. Looking at the poison barrier lingering before her, there was only undisguised disdain in Bibi Dong's eyes. She possessed 2 top-tier spirits, the Death Spider Emperor and the Soul-Eating Spider Emperor. Among them, the Death Spider Emperor was inherently the king of all poisons in the world. She also had extremely strong poison resistance, was nearly immune to all poisons, and ordinary deadly poisons were practically useless against her. In her view, this circle of poison barrier was just the same. Just at the moment Bibi Dong ignored the poison barrier and stepped into the ice and fire yin-yang well, Douluo Yan, who was quietly adjusting her breath by the spring in the depths, suddenly opened her eyes. After she took the immortal herb, her spirit evolved, and her senses far exceeded those of ordinary people. At this moment, she clearly captured that strange and powerful auras had intruded, and absolutely more than one person. Her heart tightened instantly. Douluo Yan did not hesitate in the slightest. Her figure leapt lightly, and she silently dived into the distinct cold and hot spring water of the ice and fire yin-yang well, completely hiding her own aura, holding her breath and observing the movements outside. After Bibi Dong stepped into the ice and fire yin-yang well, the first thing she did was to search for the immortal herbs here. But when she saw the scene before her clearly, her brows furrowed imperceptibly. The herb garden that should have been lush, verdant, and filled with rare treasures had actually been more than half dug away, with only a few scattered spiritual plants left in place. She slowly turned around, her gaze falling on the immobilized Douluo Bo. Douluo Bo, who did you give these immortal herbs to? With just Douluo Bo and Douluo Yan, it was absolutely impossible for them to have consumed so many immortal herbs. Douluo Bo had originally been secretly calculating a way to escape, but after seeing the current state of the ice and fire yin-yang well, his face was filled with confusion and astonishment. He had clearly only left the ice and fire yin-yang well for a short while, and before leaving, he had specifically instructed Douluo Yan to watch over this place. How could this herb garden have turned into this state in such a short time? He himself was completely confused, so how could he answer Bibi Dong's questioning? Chapter 42, Bibi Dong is my bane. Immediately, Douluo Bo suddenly thought of something. In an instant, he locked onto the culprit, Fang Yuan. When he left, the only ones in the entire medicinal garden were Yan Yan, Fang Yuan, and that 100,000-year soul beast. Yan Yan naturally couldn't have done this, and that 100,000-year soul beast's cultivation was only at the spirit master level, so only Fang Yuan could have done it. Yet right now, what made his heart tighten even more wasn't that the immortal herb had been dug up, but that Douluo Yan, along with Fang Yuan and that transformed 100,000-year soul beast, had all vanished without a trace. Where were the people? How could the medicinal garden be turned upside down in just a moment, yet Yan Yan be nowhere to be found? Could Fang Yuan have done something to his granddaughter? Worry for his granddaughter made Douluo Bo appear very agitated. How would I know? Where are my immortal herb? Beside him, Bibi Dong observed carefully, having already understood in her heart. She guessed that it was highly likely Fang Yuan had taken advantage of the gap while Douluo Bo left the ice and fire yin-yang well to sneak in and clean the place out. However, Bibi Dong shifted her gaze slightly and spoke softly, her tone carrying a hint of intriguing chill. "Where is your granddaughter, Douluo Yan?" Once these words were out, an extremely complex emotion surged within her own heart. In the third life, she had personally and forcefully torn apart Douluo Yan and Fang Yuan, those lovers who were deeply in love and had long since set a marriage contract. Every time she thought of this, her heart felt both a twisted pleasure like revenge and a heart-wrenching pain. Clearly, she was the one who was rightfully and first to have set a marriage contract with A Yuan, so why pass down the order to search with full effort for Douluo Yan and those by her side? Bibi Dong's voice was cold and sharp, her killing intent undisguised. "Douluo Yan, kill without mercy. But for the people by her side, do not harm a single hair on them, capture them alive without exception." Bibi Dong was certain that Fang Yuan was definitely with Douluo Yan at this moment. As long as she kept an eye on Douluo Yan, she would surely be able to follow the clues and find A Yuan's whereabouts. After all, in the third life, the affection between the two of them was so good. Hearing this, Douluo Bo went stiff all over, his face turning deathly pale in an instant. I am willing to serve Spirit Hall." Douluo Bo blurted out, his voice trembling with suppressed emotion, casting aside all his dignity and pride. "As long as you don't hurt Yan Yan, I will agree to anything you ask." Bibi Dong merely swept a faint glance at him, her eyes rippleless, she neither nodded nor refused. In her eyes, Douluo Bo still had utility, he was an excellent bait to lure out Douluo Yan and Fang Yuan. Confirming that the immortal herb had been completely taken by Fang Yuan and there was no need to linger here, Bibi Dong immediately ordered the follow-up matters. She let Chrysanthemum Douluo stay behind to take over the ice and fire yin-yang well and clean up the mess, while she herself turned and left through the air, wondering where A Yuan would go next. Meanwhile, beneath the spring water of the ice and fire yin-yang well, Douluo Yan was holding her breath and focusing, hiding in the depths, her whole body tense. The water flow isolated most of the sounds and aura from the outside world. Relying on her unique physique that was immune to water and fire, she hid motionless within it, holding her breath and listening to every movement above the water surface, not daring to make the slightest sound. However, the hatred in her eyes was difficult to conceal. Bibi Dong. In the deep and quiet blue-silver forest, the blue-silver grass spread out like a tide. Between the branches and leaves, a faint dark aura was entwined, cold and eerie, completely different from the gentle and moist nature of ordinary blue-silver grass. Xiaowu huddled to one side, her pretty face deathly pale. Her lively almond-shaped eyes were now filled with terror as she watched the scene of those dark blue-silver grass growing wildly and devouring everything around them after Fang Yuan activated his spirit ability, her body shivering uncontrollably. One must know that there were quite a few seeds of this blue-silver grass inside her body. From the moment the blue-silver king saw Fang Yuan, he had noticed Xiaowu behind him. With his cultivation strength, he saw through at a glance the aura of the 100,000-year soft bones rabbit transformed spirit beast hidden beneath Xiaowu's human skin. However, the spirit beast world was inherently cruel, a place where the weak were the prey of the strong, and there was no such thing as camaraderie. Moreover, looking at the natural food chain, blue-silver grass was precisely one of the main food sources for the soft bones rabbit. In the past, who knew how many of his kind had been buried in rabbit stomachs? Now that Xiaowu had fallen into Fang Yuan's hands, he knew Fang Yuan's intentions. Far from feeling any sympathy, he felt it was only natural and naturally would not raise any objections to Fang Yuan for the sake of a former, natural enemy. After a moment of silence, the blue-silver king's old and steady voice echoed in the forest, carrying a hint of a reminder. "Your Majesty, once a spirit beast cultivates to 100,000 years, over the long years, they will more or less make some companions, especially those 100,000-year soul beasts that have successfully broken through their shackles and transformed into humans. They often have strong spirit beast protection behind them. The one beside you has a special status, so I hope you will be extra careful. Do not easily take her deep into the heart of the spirit beast forest. If you happen to run into her former kin or companions, it is feared that trouble will arise. Back then, he had guarded the 100,000-year blue-silver Emperor Yin, who had just transformed and was still ignorant and fragile, never leaving her side for a step, protecting her all the way. Fang Yuan nodded slightly upon hearing this. He naturally understood these principles clearly, even more thoroughly than the Blue-Silver King knew. He knew clearly that in the heart of the Star Do Great Forest, Xiaowu had two guardians with heaven-shaking combat power, the Sky Azure Bull Python and the Titan Giant Ape. Those were 100,000-year soul beasts that even titled Douluo had to fear. "Thank you, I will be careful," he replied indifferently, indicating that he had it under control. His spirit power had now broken through to level 56. His first spirit, the Radiant Phoenix, still had 3 spirit ring slots empty, and each one was crucial for a significant increase in strength. But the most troublesome problem was that spirit beast with the light attribute were inherently extremely rare in the world, so finding one that suited him was naturally difficult. He also knew that Spirit Hall had many books, their inherited spirit was the Seraphim, and their intelligence network spread across the continent. They must surely possess the habitats and detailed information of many light attribute spirit beast. But Fang Yuan did not want to go to Spirit Hall now. Having simulated death 4 times in a row, all of them were more or less related to the Spirit Hall Supreme Pontiff Bibi Dong. In the dark, he felt that Bibi Dong was simply his bane. Let alone taking the initiative to seek intelligence, even if he ran into her from afar, he would take a detour. It was absolutely impossible for him to walk into the trap himself. Fang Yuan looked at the Blue-Silver King's illusory consciousness again. "I have one more matter. My current cultivation is in urgent need of light attribute spirit beast. Do you know of any?" As his voice fell, the entire sea of blue-silver grass swayed gently, the leaves rubbing against each other, emitting a faint and ethereal sound. The Blue-Silver King's old and gentle voice sounded. "Light attribute. I am in charge of the blue-silver lineage and have always been in the blue-silver forest, never leaving. I have not seen any light attribute spirit beast," the Blue-Silver King said, shaking his head at Fang Yuan. Chapter 43, Still Too Kind. Actually, at this stage, the place on the entire Douluo Continent most likely to harbor a light attribute spirit beast should still be the Star Do Great Forest. The extreme north ice plains are bitterly cold and mostly contain ice and snow attribute spirit beasts. The endless deep sea is vast, and the spirit beasts there are mostly water attribute. Only the Star Do Great Forest, with its vast territory and complex ecosystem, contains 100-year, 1,000-year, 10,000-year, and even 100,000-year soul beasts. It encompasses all kinds of attributes, so the probability of a light attribute spirit beast residing there is far greater than anywhere else. If one wants to find a light attribute spirit ring that is a perfect fit and has sufficient potential, this is almost the optimal choice. However, Fang Yuan's gaze tilted slightly, sweeping calmly over Xiaowu not far beside him. In his eyes, beneath this skin lay a genuine 100,000-year soft bones rabbit that had taken human form, a walking top-tier opportunity, and also a hidden bomb that could detonate at any moment. Carrying such an existence into the Star Do Great Forest would undoubtedly cause his danger coefficient to soar to the extreme. Furthermore, the Star Do Great Forest was her homeland. The core region even had top-tier combatants like Da Ming and Ming, who were also 100,000-year soul beasts. Once his trail was discovered, they would inevitably come, and he would be besieged by trouble. Forget about hunting for a spirit ring in peace, he would likely be in danger himself. More importantly, his current physical body strength and mental force were not yet able to withstand the violent impact of a 100,000-year spirit ring. Why couldn't she just sacrifice herself? A trace of regret flashed in Fang Yuan's eyes. The version of himself in the simulation was still too kind. If, during the simulation, he had hardened his heart and used a little Gu to bewitch and manipulate her, he could have made this simple-minded, guileless rabbit loyal and trusting to the extreme. At that point, with just a little trickery, he could have made her willingly sacrifice herself, handing over her 100,000-year spirit ring and spirit bone. It was a pity that he had exposed his true colors. Now that Xiao Wu's memory had undergone awakening and she was deeply wary of him, trying to trick her into sacrificing herself was almost impossible. Though thoughts surged, Fang Yuan was never one to wallow in useless regret and assumptions. Weighing the pros and cons in an instant, he made his decision: he would still head to the Star Do Great Forest to hunt for a spirit ring. Even if he couldn't find an ideal light attribute spirit beast in the end, as long as the spirit ring's age was sufficient and the attributes didn't conflict, he could accept it for the time being. There was no need to be stubborn. He now possessed twin spirits, his spirit power was firmly seated at the level of a level 56 Spirit King, and the super-strong recovery and flight abilities granted by the 100,000-year Blue-Silver Emperor right leg bone were formidable. The mind-condensing wisdom skull had long since reached the conditions for absorption. Once fused, his mental force would skyrocket. Coupled with the vast sea cosmic shroud, a divine artifact capable of concealment, defense, and trapping enemies, as long as he didn't actively venture deep into the core area and confront a true 100,000-year soul beast head-on, there was almost nothing in the Star Do Great Forest that could easily threaten his life. As for Xiao Wu, Fang Yuan did not hesitate in the slightest. He left Xiao Wu directly in the Blue-Silver Forest, ordering the Blue-Silver King to take full charge of watching her. This would neither let her follow him to the Star Do Great Forest and cause trouble, nor would it leave any possibility for her to escape. Fang Yuan traveled rapidly, keeping his spirit power restrained, and using the most energy-efficient and covert way to travel. Along the way, as he passed towns, post stations, and spirit master teams, various pieces of information constantly reached his ears. One piece of news made his footsteps falter slightly. The poisoned Douluo, Dugu Bo, had been captured by Spirit Hall. That old fellow, Dugu Bo, had the lowest strength among titled Douluo and was secretly called the disgrace of the titled Douluo in the circle. But no matter how weak he was still a genuine titled Douluo, and a powerhouse who held the status of a guest elder of the Heaven Do imperial family on the surface. Now that he had been openly abducted by Spirit Hall, it was impossible for the Heaven Do Empire to have no reaction. But it was just a reaction, nothing more. Protests, condemnations, denunciations. It sounded high-sounding, but in reality, it was weak and powerless. The Grand Heaven Do imperial family, apart from this outsider guest elder Dugu Bo, didn't even have a single titled Douluo of their own. Look at Spirit Hall by contrast. Just on the surface, they had 8 titled Douluo, including Supreme Pontiff Bibi Dong, Chrysanthemum Douluo, and Ghost Douluo, sitting in command. As for those hidden in the dark who had not been exposed, they were even more unfathomable. The disparity in strength between the two sides was so obvious. Apart from paying lip service, what else could the Heaven Do Empire do? They could do nothing. The news continued to circulate. Tang Hao and his son Tang San, who were in exile, traveled by night and rested by day, avoiding densely populated areas. However, when resting in a remote town, they clearly heard the discussions of others. Tang San had grown up in Saint Spirit Village since he was a child and had not taken a single step out of the village for 6 whole years. He was originally a lonely soul from another world, having undergone transmigration. He had finally cherished having family, yet he was being hunted by Spirit Hall along with his father, wandering in displacement and narrowly escaping death. Hearing that Spirit Hall was so unscrupulous as to forcibly abduct a guest elder of the Heaven Do Empire, his anger was ignited. Even though he didn't know what a so-called titled Douluo actually was. He furrowed his brows, his fists clenching involuntarily. This Heaven Do Empire is just too weak. The Empire's guest elder, a dignified titled Douluo, was forcibly abducted by Spirit Hall within their own empire, and they couldn't even put up a bit of resistance. He paused, his tone carrying unconscious hatred when mentioning Spirit Hall. Spirit Hall is truly dark, cruel, and cold-blooded. To achieve their goals, they stop at nothing, treating human life like grass and rules like nothing. Tang Hao walked in front with steady steps. He stopped, turned around, and looked at his son, whose appearance was ordinary and bore no resemblance to Yin. He took a deep breath and finally chose to lay out the truth that had been sealed for many years, bit by bit, in front of his son. Back then, your mother, Yin, just wanted to live a peaceful life with us. But because of her special identity, the then Supreme Pontiff of Spirit Hall, Qian Xunji, personally led a large group of experts to surround and kill us. To protect me and you, your mother eventually chose to sacrifice herself, which bought us a glimmer of survival. After hearing Tang Hao's words, the fire in Tang San's eyes burned even brighter, and the hatred in his heart deepened a layer. In his previous life, Tang San was an orphan, without father or mother, alone in the world. After transmigration, what he cherished most was this hard-won family affection. Fatherly love and motherly love were the things he longed for most, they were the softest bottom line in his heart. His nails dug deep into his palms, oozing blood, but Tang San was completely unaware. He raised his head, his gaze as firm as iron. Although his voice was young, it carried a resolute determination as he said to Tang Hao, word by word. "Father, I understand. The hatred of killing my mother is irreconcilable. Everything Spirit Hall owes us, I will definitely collect it all, bit by bit. I swear here, one day in the future, I will personally destroy Spirit Hall to avenge my mother and seek justice for all those who have been bullied and persecuted by them." Tang Hao looked at the persistence and ruthlessness in his son's eyes, which were exactly the same as his own, and felt gratified. Little San had twin spirits and innate full spirit power, he would definitely be able to avenge Yin in the future. He patted Tang San on the shoulder. He didn't say any more words of encouragement, only saying heavily, "With this heart, your mother's spirit in heaven can also rest in peace." And in Tang Hao's own heart, a thought had already quietly stirred. He was calculating, taking advantage of the current turmoil on the continent and Spirit Hall's distracted attention, to find a safe opportunity to quietly return to Saint Spirit Village and take away the remains and spirit bone left by his wife, Yin. Chapter 44, Chance Encounter with Bibi Dong, a Missed Opportunity. Sometimes, when a person is down on their luck, even drinking cold water will get stuck between their teeth. Right now, Fang Yuan, who was deep within the Star Do Great Forest, had a profound realization of this saying. Just a moment ago, relying on the concealment and immobilization powers of the vast sea cosmic shroud, he had silently trapped a 10,000-year spirit beast with a formidable aura and was preparing to cleanly finish the hunt to absorb its spirit ring and increase his strength. Yet, just at that moment, a heaven-shaking, earth-shattering explosion erupted from the core area of the Star Do Great Forest. The earth trembled violently, towering ancient trees collapsed in swaths, and terrifying fluctuations of spirit power swept in all directions like a tsunami, causing even the air to become distorted and turbulent. Some spirit masters, upon seeing such a phenomenon, might be unable to suppress their greed and curiosity, thinking it was some heaven and earth treasure appearing or a battle between top-tier spirit beasts, and could not help but rush forward to gamble on a massive opportunity. But Fang Yuan was different. Possessing a heaven-defying trump card like the simulator, as long as he developed steadily, he would have plenty of opportunities to become stronger in the future. It was not worth risking his life. Therefore, he did not hesitate in the slightest, unleashing his fastest speed to sprint toward the outer perimeter, wanting only to get as far away from that place of trouble as possible. Man proposes, God disposes. He had barely rushed out very far when a pressure sufficient to suffocate a person suddenly descended. Fang Yuan looked up, and his heart instantly stopped. He saw that not far ahead, a purple-black figure appeared, surrounded by a dangerous aura. It was none other than the Supreme Pontiff of Spirit Hall, Bibi Dong. She wore a suit of pitch-black armor, her brows and eyes carried an unquestionable dominance and coldness, and her purple-red long hair was tied up neatly as she strode toward the core area. Clearly, that heaven-shaking, earth-shattering commotion from just now had been caused by her. And the black-haired youth who appeared all alone deep in the forbidden land of the Star Do Great Forest suddenly collided with Bibi Dong's line of sight. Her brows furrowed imperceptibly, and a trace of surprise flashed through her eyes. How dangerous was the core of the Star Do Great Forest? Ordinary spirit masters did not even dare to easily step into the outer perimeter, yet this youth, who looked to be only in his teens, dared to venture deep into such a place alone. It was truly strange. However, she was currently anxious to hunt a 100,000-year soul beast and had no time to spare to investigate further, so she merely swept a faint glance at Fang Yuan before turning her head to instruct the high-ranking deacon behind her, "Take this child back." "Yes, Your Majesty." The deacon acknowledged the order. At the same time, he also felt it was peculiar. How could such a child suddenly appear deep in the Stardo Great Forest? Did he get separated from his elders, or was there another reason? Fang Yuan's heart leapt into his throat. Fortunately, Bibi Dong's mind was entirely on the 100,000-year soul beast at this moment, and she did not immediately recognize his identity. He quietly breathed a sigh of relief, his brain spinning rapidly as he calculated a plan to escape. As it turned out, he didn't even have to think of one. Bibi Dong had already flashed away, rushing hurriedly toward the depths of the core, leaving behind only one person from Spirit Hall. The deacon was about to step forward, preparing to take Fang Yuan to a safe area to await his fate. But just as he raised his hand and turned his head, the black-haired youth who had been standing on the spot just a moment ago had actually vanished into thin air, as if he had evaporated from the world, leaving no trace behind. "Where is he?" The deacon's face changed drastically, and he froze on the spot, cold sweat instantly soaking his back. The order that the Supreme Pontiff had just personally issued, he had messed up in the blink of an eye. On the other side, Fang Yuan had already guessed the true purpose of Bibi Dong and her group invading the Stardo Great Forest. His body was shrouded in the pale blue shimmer of the vast sea cosmic shroud, his aura, spirit power, and figure all completely hidden, like a breeze merging into the forest, silently weaving through the trees. Wherever he looked, teams of spirit saints and spirit Douluo wearing the iconic attire of Spirit Hall were methodically gathering rapidly toward the core area of the forest, their footsteps steady. Clearly, this was a well-planned and fully prepared operation. Fang Yuan's heart tightened, and almost subconsciously, he murmured in pain, "My spirit ring." Within the Stardo Great Forest, besides the Sky Azure Bull Python and the Titan Giant Ape, the two top-tier 100,000-year soul beasts guarding the Lake of Life, there were indeed many hidden 10,000-year, 100,000-year, and even more terrifying vicious spirit beasts. But Fang Yuan didn't have the strength to hunt them right now. Moreover, he still held the crucial bargaining chip of Xiao Wu. Given the Sky Azure Bull Python and the Titan Giant Ape's cherishing and protection of Xiao Wu, as long as he firmly controlled Xiao Wu, relying on this bond that went deep into their bloodlines, it was not impossible to force Da Ming and Ming to voluntarily sacrifice themselves, delivering him spirit rings and spirit bones. But as soon as this calculation arose in his heart, he had a bad premonition. First, there was Du Guyan appearing at the Ice and Fire Yin-Yang Well and consuming an immortal herb. Now there was Bibi Dong personally leading the elite of Spirit Hall, heading straight for the Stardo Core to hunt a 100,000-year soul beast. One thing after another, everything had long since deviated from the original trajectory. Having awakened their simulated memories, they were all relying on the advantage of foresight to actively seize opportunities. And looking at himself now, his cultivation was still shallow, his foundation insufficient, and he was completely unable to compete with them. Back at the Ice and Fire Yin-Yang Well, if he hadn't simulated again, and if Du Gubo hadn't left for other matters, it would have been impossible for him to obtain the immortal herb so easily. Could it be that he had to start the simulation again? Deep in the Stardo Great Forest, spirit power circulated around Bibi Dong, her aura as cold as ice. Although she had temporarily suppressed the arrogant and conceited Qian Xunji, she felt no relief in her heart. She understood this daughter of hers too well. Her talent was peerless, her foundation heaven-defying, and she even possessed the angel god legacy. Wanting to catch up to, or even surpass her, was merely a matter of time. Coupled with Qian Douluo providing full protection on the side, and since Qian Xunji was her own biological daughter, she ultimately could not bring herself to kill her. Since she could not eliminate her, she could only make herself stronger, strong enough to keep her suppressed. It was precisely because of this that Bibi Dong had organized this soul-hunting operation. Yet, a lingering doubt always hovered between Bibi Dong's brows. That thin, small figure she had caught a glimpse of while passing by just now kept circling in her mind. At such a young age, to be all alone and dare to venture deep into the perilous Stardo Great Forest, with neither attendants nor guards, and no sect markings. It was truly too bizarre. In a flash of lightning, several names that had been secretly investigated but whose whereabouts remained unknown suddenly flashed through her mind. Fang Yuan. The age of one of them matched exactly with the figure she had just seen. But that Fang Yuan, according to the intelligence, was clearly a waste with a trash spirit and no innate spirit power, unable to even carry out the most basic spirit master cultivate. How could he possibly break into the Star Do Great Forest alone? Was it a coincidence? Chapter 45, Tracking Spirit Ability. After hunting for his spirit ring, Fang Yuan did not delay for a moment, heading straight back to the blue-silver forest, where he dove into the deepest part to cultivate in seclusion. Here, the blue-silver grass was as dense as waves, and the life energy was so rich it almost materialized, making it the most suitable place for Fang Yuan, who possessed the dark blue-silver emperor spirit, to quiet his mind, cultivate, and stabilize his realm. He sat cross-legged with his eyes tightly closed, his dark blue-silver emperor and radiant phoenix spirits quietly dormant within his body, circulating his spirit power. Having hunted 3 spirit rings in succession, his spirit power was fed back to him. Fang Yuan's cultivation advanced by leaps and bounds without the slightest hindrance from a bottleneck. 2 months later, an aura, far more vigorous and heavy than before, erupted. Level 60. In the true sense, he had stepped into the ranks of the upper middle echelon of the Spirit Master's world. This scene, falling into the eyes of Xiao Wu, who was also cultivating diligently nearby, made her entire body freeze in place. Watching the stabilized aura around Fang Yuan, her rabbit eyes widened, her heart churned, and she almost suspected that she had developed hallucinations from cultivating. She was a 100,000-year soft bones rabbit who had taken human form, and her innate talent far exceeded that of ordinary people. But now, she was not even 8 years old, and despite cultivating with all her might, she had only just reached level 19, not even counting as a spirit grandmaster. Looking at Fang Yuan again, who was not much older than her, yet had cultivated all the way to level 60, his speed was ridiculously fast. Xiao Wu silently looked down at her small hands, then looked at Fang Yuan, whose aura was unfathomable not far away, and for the first time, felt deep doubt about her own identity. Who exactly is the 100,000-year soul beast in human form? This cultivation speed is simply unreasonable. Theoretically, with Fang Yuan's terrifying talent and twin top-tier spirits, as long as he took it one step at a time and remained steady, charging toward a god position in the future was almost a certainty. But for some reason, ever since he returned from hunting his spirit rings, that inexplicable restlessness in Fang Yuan's heart had not dissipated. While sitting quietly to cultivate, he always had a lingering sense of unease. It was as if a pair of invisible eyes had long since been watching him from the shadows, waiting only for a suitable opportunity to suddenly pounce and devour him completely. This made Fang Yuan even more vigilant. And Fang Yuan's premonition did not turn out to be wrong. On this day, Fang Yuan was immersed in cultivation, sorting out the spirit power that had become somewhat agitated after his breakthrough to level 60, when suddenly, the Blue-Silver King's urgent and grave voice sounded in his ears. This voice was no longer as gentle as usual, but instead carried a hint of imperceptible tension. Your Majesty, a group of spirit masters has suddenly broken into the outskirts of the blue-silver forest. There are many of them, yet they act in unison. I see that they do not come with good intentions, heading straight for the inner circle. I fear they are coming for you. As the king of the blue-silver grass line, the blue-silver king's mind was connected to the entire blue-silver forest. Within the forest, every ordinary blue-silver grass was his eyes and ears. The moment that group of spirit masters stepped across the forest boundary, they were firmly locked onto by him, and their every move could not escape his perception. Fang Yuan's eyes snapped open, a cold light flashing and vanishing in his pupils. He knew too well what kind of place the blue-silver forest was. There were no powerful spirit beasts here, no rare immortal herbs, and certainly no heaven and earth treasure that would make high-level spirit masters flock here. Ordinary spirit masters, even if they were lost, might not wander in here. Now, suddenly, a group of spirit masters with clear objectives and aggressive momentum had broken in. One could figure out with their toes that there was definitely a problem. Go. Fang Yuan did not hesitate in the slightest, grabbed Xiao Wu, who hadn't yet reacted, protected her at his side, and turned to retreat in the opposite direction of these people. But just after he had moved for a short while, on the outskirts of the forest, several sounds of breaking through the air suddenly rang out. A group of spirit masters dressed in uniform attire with cold auras were rapidly weaving through the blue-silver grass. At the very front, a young man with a weary face held an ancient-looking compass in his hands, the needle in the center of the compass vibrating wildly, locking onto a direction with absolute precision. It was precisely the location where Fang Yuan was. The next moment, the young man's eyes sharpened, and he shouted in a low voice, "The target has moved." Before the words had even faded, a black shadow suddenly flashed beside him. A lean agility attack system spirit emperor, whose speed was fast to the extreme, said nothing, wrapped his arm around, and directly picked up the young man. The two merged into one, their spirit power fully unleashed, and the spirit rings under their feet shone brightly. Swoosh! Like an arrow released from a bowstring, they followed the direction indicated by the compass, chasing frantically. Fang Yuan had also long since used the Blue-Silver Emperor's ability to turn the entire forest into his eyes and ears. Every blue-silver grass swaying gently in the wind was his mobile eyes and ears, and every move of that group of spirit masters was clearly reflected in his mind. When he sensed that the other party had suddenly changed direction, as if using precise positioning, and was rushing at full speed straight toward his moving position, Fang Yuan's brows instantly furrowed. Is that a tracking-type spirit ability? In the Spirit Master's world, the vast majority of spirit abilities were aimed directly at combat, power attack, control, defense, agility attack. Even for support system Spirit Masters, they were mostly of the healing, amplification, or defense type. Tracking-type spirit abilities like this that could accurately lock onto a target's position were truly extremely rare, and each one could be considered a rarity. If not for the assistance of such a spirit ability, the other party would never have been able to lock onto his precise location so quickly. Fang Yuan quickly scanned the images transmitted by the blue-silver grass in his mind, rapidly assessing the enemy's combat strength. Among this group, they had numbers, but the only one who truly possessed aerial pursuit capability was the agility attack system Spirit Emperor carrying the young man with the compass. As for himself, he not only had the speed enhancement from the Radiant Phoenix Spirit, but also the 100,000-year Blue-Silver Emperor right leg bone. In terms of pure speed alone, let alone an agility attack system Spirit Emperor pursuing while carrying a burden, even a spirit saint of the same rank might not necessarily be able to catch up to him. If he hadn't considered that they still had companions, Fang Yuan could even have stopped directly and taken down these two people rushing at the front. You want to chase me? Fang Yuan snorted coldly in his heart and hesitated no longer. He held Xiao Wu's hand tightly, his spirit power surging within him, and on his right leg bone, the pale green light of the 100,000-year spirit bone suddenly bloomed. In an instant, a gale rolled up from beneath his feet, his figure seemed to turn into a wisp of light smoke, and his speed suddenly skyrocketed several times over. In just a few breaths, the pursuing aura that had originally been biting closely at his heels was completely shaken off by him. Fang Yuan took Xiao Wu and sped all the way, successfully rushing out of the blue-silver forest and disappearing into the depths of the rolling mountains and forests. Behind them, in the pursuing team, the young man holding the compass looked at the needle, which was becoming weaker and weaker, and finally almost stopped vibrating, his expression instantly becoming extremely ugly. He shouted urgently to the agility attack system Spirit Emperor beside him, "Faster! Faster!" He is about to completely escape the tracking range. The effective tracking range of his compass spirit ability was only 10 kilometers. Once it exceeded this distance, the tracking would be completely interrupted, and wanting to lock onto the target again would be difficult. It had been so difficult to probe layer by layer and hunt all the way to finally touch upon a trace of the other party, only to watch the person slip away right under their noses. The young man clenched the compass tightly, his eyes full of unwillingness. If they couldn't find the person, that would be one thing, but now that they had clearly locked onto the target, the other party had still easily escaped. After they returned, how were they supposed to answer to the Supreme Pontiff? Just thinking about that lord's current methods made him shudder all over. Chapter 46, City Lockdown, Massive Missing Person Notice. The agility attack system Spirit Master holding the youth's expression darkened. Knowing the gravity of the matter, he dared not hold anything back. 6 spirit rings suddenly rose around his body, and his spirit ability was instantly pushed to its limit. Wings of spirit power light unfolded behind him, his speed surged once more, and he transformed into a streak of light, chasing wildly in the direction of the compass's final indication. The wind whistled in his ears, and the vegetation retreated madly. Yet, even though he had given his all, in just a few short moments, the indicator completely lost its direction and showed no further reaction. Lost him. The youth holding the compass turned pale, his voice trembling slightly. The 10-kilometer range had been exceeded, the signal was completely cut off, and they could no longer capture any trace of Fang Yuan. Several people stood where they were, looking at the vast forest, their faces shifting between pale and livid. In the end, they could only grit their teeth and continue searching along the direction the compass last indicated, while not daring to delay in reporting the entire process of discovering the target and unfortunately losing him to Bibi Dong. Bibi Dong was sitting quietly with her eyes closed, her spirit power circulating, with a faint trace of divine force flowing. She had been in seclusion to cultivate for some time, but deep within her heart, she was always preoccupied with the figure that she could not let go of. Regarding those, Fang Yuan, who had not been found, except for those confirmed dead, she had long since secretly ordered people to collect relevant personal items to use as tracking media to search everywhere. To be honest, she did not hold much hope for this. So many days had passed, the sea of people was vast, the Douluo Continent was boundless, and the other party was deliberately hiding, trying to find him was no different from looking for a needle in a haystack. She had her subordinates act, but it was just holding on to a shred of luck. But when the message, target's trail discovered, arrived, even with Bibi Dong's composure and calmness, her mind was instantly stirred, and an irrepressible ecstasy rushed straight to her brain. This is heaven's will. Almost immediately after receiving the message, she rushed over. Where did you discover the target? The youth responsible for tracking in the distance dared not hide anything, immediately bowing, and respectfully and tremblingly replied, reporting to the Supreme Pontiff, it was in the blue-silver forest. Hearing it was the blue-silver forest, Bibi Dong became even more certain that the Fang Yuan they encountered this time was the A Yuan she was looking for. It should also be the boy she had encountered in the forest last time. On the other side, Fang Yuan brought Xiao Wu and sped all the way. After completely leaving the blue-silver forest, he specifically chose remote paths to travel, eventually entering a nearby human town. Just as they approached the notice wall near the city gate, they saw from afar a large crowd of people gathered tightly, with noise rising and falling. In the very center of the crowd, brand new notices were posted. They were exactly the missing person notices released by Spirit Hall. Unlike the previous notices that only had vague descriptions and did not mention names or appearances at all, this missing person notice clearly printed. Name, Fang Yuan. Age, 8 years old. On it was also a portrait of Fang Yuan. Beside it was also marked a huge gold coin reward that would make any ordinary Spirit Master family go crazy with desire. Under a heavy reward, there must be brave men. The surrounding passers-by, spirit masters, and merchants were all extremely excited, pointing and gesturing at the notice, their discussions rising wave after wave. Who exactly is this person? To actually make Spirit Hall spend such a huge price to find him. He doesn't look very old. I'm afraid he offended some big shot, right? As long as I can provide information, I won't have to worry for the rest of my life. I must take a good look. What if I happen to run into him? Listening to the noisy and excited discussions all around, Fang Yuan's heart sank slightly. He calmly reached out to pull his cloak, pressing the brim of his hat down, almost covering most of his face, revealing only his tense jawline. Fortunately, he had always been cautious. Every time he entered a town, he would deliberately cover his appearance and never use his real name. Otherwise, he would have likely been recognized by now and fallen into a siege on the spot. He raised his eyes and looked again at the familiar face on the notice. Fang Yuan understood instantly. It seemed that during the last unexpected face-to-face encounter with Bibi Dong, although the other party could not immediately confirm his identity at the time, after calm reflection, Bibi Dong had eventually locked onto him in hindsight. It was precisely that thrilling encounter that caused him to develop the habit of always disguising himself and never showing his face from then on. Just as Fang Yuan was silently assessing the situation and preparing to take Xiao Wu and quietly retreat from the edge of the crowd. Clang! A deafening loud noise suddenly came from the direction of the city gate. The thick city gate of the entire town was slammed shut by someone. The huge bolt dropped heavily, locking all paths of entry and exit. Immediately after, teams of spirit masters wearing Spirit Hall standard uniforms quickly poured out from both ends of the street. The sound of armor clashing, the faint light of spirit rings lighting up, and majestic cold shouts rang out simultaneously. Spirit Hall is on official business. The whole city is locked down. No one is allowed to enter or leave. Strictly inspect all intersections. If you see the person on the notice, take him down immediately. The entire city was instantly taken over and locked down by Spirit Hall. Fang Yuan's footsteps paused, and he tightened his grip on Xiao Wu's hand slightly. Bibi Dong's actions were even faster and more ruthless than he had imagined. This was, after all, the territory of the Heaven Dou Empire, nominally still under the jurisdiction of the Heaven Dou imperial family, and not a place where Spirit Hall could run rampant at will. In the past, even if there were major events, Spirit Hall would at least give the imperial family some face, doing some superficial courtesies and concealment. But this time, Bibi Dong couldn't even be bothered to do the most basic concealment. She was actually so unscrupulous. With one order, she had people lock down the city directly. The city gates were locked tight, the sounds of martial law spread through the streets and alleys, and the entire city instantly turned into a huge cage. Ordinary people were too scared to go out, and soon there was only the neat and cold sound of Spirit Hall Spirit Master footsteps left on the streets. After the lockdown, there was an omnipresent search. Teams of Spirit Hall Spirit Masters holding portraits dispersed into various streets and alleys, starting to search house by house. At the same time, new notices were quickly plastered all over the city walls. The bounty on the missing person notice surged again on the basis of the original huge amount, high enough to allow any small family to instantly rank among the prominent families. By this point, no matter how slow the surrounding people were, they vaguely guessed the truth. This was not some missing person notice at all. This was clearly a euphemistic wanted poster. To be able to make Spirit Hall go to such lengths within the Heaven Dou Empire, locking down the city for a search, and repeatedly increasing the reward. What exactly did this wanted person do? Chapter 47, Bad Luck and a Jinxed Mouth. Fang Yuan raised his hand wearily, his fingertips rubbing hard against his throbbing brow, his temples pulsing. He only wanted to cultivate peacefully, improve steadily, and step by step walk the path to godhood. He had never thought about provoking anyone, let alone being pursued relentlessly by the high and mighty Supreme Pontiff Bibi Dong of the Spirit Hall. He couldn't help but mock himself inwardly. Just how bad could his luck possibly be? First, he went to the Star Dou Great Forest to hunt for a spirit ring, intending to find a quiet place to absorb it in peace, only to run headlong into Bibi Dong. After narrowly escaping and fleeing back to the Blue-Silver Forest to recuperate, he unluckily ran into the Spirit Masters from the Spirit Hall specifically tasked with searching for him. The opponent's tracking spirit clearly had a range limit, otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to shake them off so easily. Yet, somehow, within that limited range, he had run right into them. Several endings from the simulator flashed through his mind. Every encounter with Bibi Dong had never led to anything good. Thinking of those tragic endings, the determination in Fang Yuan's eyes deepened. Run, he had to run. This was his only chance. Bibi Dong had not arrived in person yet. Although the town was under lockdown, ordinary titled Douluo could not possibly see through the ability of the vast sea cosmic shroud to isolate his aura. As long as he maintained his invisibility and left this blockaded town silently, he could escape the Spirit Hall's pursuit once again. At this thought, Fang Yuan couldn't help but feel relieved once more. The reward the simulator had given him back then was the vast sea cosmic shroud. With it, his aura was completely hidden, and his figure was fully invisible. As long as he didn't run into Bibi Dong, ordinary titled Douluo would never be able to track him. Not daring to waste another second, Fang Yuan focused all his attention, driving the power of the vast sea cosmic shroud to its limit. His aura returned to nothingness, and he silently darted towards the weakest point of the town's blockade. Fang Yuan gently held Xiao Wu with one hand, pushing the power of the vast sea cosmic shroud to the limit. A pale blue transparent barrier completely enveloped them, perfectly hiding their aura, figure, and spirit power fluctuations. With a light tap of his toes on the ground, the two of them, like two invisible shadows, stepped out of the city gate without a sound. The night wind outside the city was cool. Having moved away from the layers of Spirit Hall spirit masters blockading the city, Fang Yuan was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He suddenly felt that he hadn't just been unlucky lately, he was practically a jinx. He had just made up his mind to escape, saying he wouldn't run into Bibi Dong, and immediately after, he ran into the person he wanted to see the least. Outside the city gate, in the middle of the empty road, a tall and dignified figure stood quietly. Bibi Dong stood at the very front, wearing black armor, her brow carrying an air of dominance over the world. Behind her on both sides, Ghost Douluo Gui Mei and Chrysanthemum Douluo Yu Guan stood with bowed bodies, their auras cold and solemn. They had clearly been waiting here for a long time. And Bibi Dong's pair of purple eyes were locked directly onto him, even in his invisible state. There was no hesitation, not a hint of probing. She had clearly noticed the anomaly at a single glance. Fang Yuan's heart sank to the bottom in an instant. He dared not move recklessly. The next second, Bibi Dong lifted her foot lightly, walking gracefully and calmly straight to him before stopping. A faint, yet highly oppressive smile curled at the corners of her lips, beautiful, elegant, and carrying unquestionable dignity. Her voice was soft. Yuan, look, this is fate. Last time we missed each other, this time, heaven has sent you back to me once again. As her voice fell, she raised that slender, fair, jade-carved hand, her fingertips gently tapping the transparent barrier of the vast sea cosmic shroud, which isolated all auras. Crack, a soft sound. That invisible barrier, which was indestructible before ordinary titled Douluo, shattered easily under her fingertips like fragile glass. Ripples of spirit power spread out, and the invisibility effect dissipated instantly. Fang Yuan and Xiao Wu's figures were exposed in the night, without any concealment. Bibi Dong's palm did not stop, she followed the momentum and raised it gently. Her slightly cool fingertips brushed softly against Fang Yuan's cheek. The touch was delicate, yet it made Fang Yuan go stiff all over. She gazed at Fang Yuan, a trace of a smile flashing in her eyes, her tone playful. This time, you've grown into this appearance. I didn't even recognize you last time. Fang Yuan's mouth twitched, and his heart was left with nothing but helplessness. So what if I grew up like this? In the end, wasn't I still seen through by you? So, what do you want to do this time? Fang Yuan slowly raised his eyes, looking directly at the high and mighty supreme pontiff of the spirit hall before him, his voice calm, revealing little emotion. But only he knew in his heart just how nervous he was. Currently, his appearance was still just that of a half-grown child, his frame thin, and his spirit power was far from having grown to the point where he could contend with a titled Douluo. Bibi Dong, she shouldn't be truly deranged enough to lay a hand on a child, right? Fang Yuan was also concerned about one important matter. Would he still be able to cultivate peacefully afterward? What would his treatment be like? Would there be enough resources to help him reach godhood? He had never been someone who cared too much about face. If he could really rely on the big tree that was the spirit hall, he wouldn't mind being a kept man at all. But the problem was, the women surrounding him were one more abnormal than the next. Countless scenes from the simulator flashed through his mind in an instant. It wasn't that he hadn't yielded or compromised in the past, but what he got in return was never peace. Instead, it was the other party's near-pathological desire for control, an endless imprisonment that was almost suffocating. More importantly, he couldn't cultivate, couldn't reach godhood. Yuan, what are you saying? Of course I will protect you well. Upon hearing Fang Yuan's question, Bibi Dong replied, her expression unchanged. Facts proved once again that Fang Yuan's premonition was so accurate that it made him feel desperate. His unlucky, jinxed mouth had once again accurately guessed the worst possible outcome. From the very beginning, Bibi Dong had no intention of giving him the chance to move freely or cultivate in peace. Not to mention that Fang Yuan's physique naturally attracted attention. As long as he was let out, wherever he went, he would attract a bunch of entanglements, endless romantic troubles, and constant trouble. What made her even more wary was her daughter, who was equally paranoid to the extreme, Qian Xunji, who was currently searching the whole world frantically for Fang Yuan. Given Qian Xunji's current reckless and determined madness, once she ran into Fang Yuan, the situation would inevitably spiral completely out of control. By then, the mother and daughter would be at loggerheads, and with a Fang Yuan who was determined to escape, it would only turn everything upside down, making it impossible to resolve. This was something Bibi Dong absolutely would not allow to happen. Therefore, from the beginning, she had made up her mind to keep him firmly by her side, never letting him out of her sight. Chapter 48. Is this also considered a kind of master-disciple legacy? Bibi Dong's gaze slowly shifted, landing on Xiao Wu, who was to the side. She merely released a faint trace of Supreme Pontiff pressure, and Xiao Wu trembled all over, instinctively shivering, her small body huddling tightly behind Fang Yuan. Her watery, bright eyes were filled with terror, yet they stubbornly revealed undisguised hatred as she stared fixedly at Bibi Dong. I was wondering why I couldn't find this little rabbit after scouring Soto City, Bibi Dong chuckled, her tone calm yet filled with oppression. So it was you, Yuan, who secretly took her away. She paused, her gaze returning to Fang Yuan. Her eyes softened slightly, yet it only made one's heart tighten even more. Come to think of it, you were in Soto City at that time, we were actually that close. It's a pity I couldn't meet you sooner, letting you, Yuan, suffer so much out there. That tone was as if the two were old acquaintances who had known each other for many years and had an excellent relationship. Fang Yuan felt extremely uncomfortable under her gaze, which fluctuated between soft and hard, filled with possessiveness. He furrowed his brows slightly but remained silent. Saying anything was useless. If talking was useful, he wouldn't have been backstabbed and imprisoned. Behind Bibi Dong, Chrysanthemum Douluo and Ghost Douluo exchanged a glance, both seeing deep curiosity in each other's eyes. This high and mighty, cold, and ruthless Supreme Pontiff had actually ordered the whole world to search for a young boy. This in itself was baffling enough. Seeing Fang Yuan with their own eyes now, he was just a young, immature boy, lonely and helpless. No matter how they looked at it, he had nothing to do with the Supreme Pontiff of Spirit Hall. What on earth was worth the Supreme Pontiff going to such great lengths? While puzzled, a flash of inspiration suddenly struck Chrysanthemum Douluo, over at the Elders' Hall, that young Lord Qian Xunji had also been searching for someone like a madman recently. A thought suddenly jumped into his mind, and Chrysanthemum Douluo's heart skipped a beat, an extremely ominous premonition instantly rising within him. The Supreme Pontiff was searching, and the young lord was also searching. Could they be looking for the same person? If this pair of equally paranoid and equally overbearing mother and daughter were to collide over this boy, that would truly be absurd. Fang Yuan was ultimately brought back to Spirit City, the city that symbolized the supreme power of Spirit Hall. There were no twists and turns, nor was he given any chance to struggle. Throughout the journey, Bibi Dong kept him under personal guard, never leaving his side. He was brought directly into the depths of the Supreme Pontiff Palace, into that secret chamber that had left an indelible mark on him in several simulations. The heavy stone door slowly closed, completely isolating all light and sound from the outside world, leaving only a silence that was suppressed to the extreme. From being brought back to Spirit City to stepping into this secret chamber, Bibi Dong handled everything personally, not letting anyone else intervene. She led the way herself, stood guard herself, and even his food, clothing, housing, and transportation were all taken care of by her personally. That overly meticulous and overly focused attitude made Fang Yuan feel an indescribable sense of horror, and a chill kept rising from the bottom of his heart. At this moment, Bibi Dong's purplish-red long hair cascaded behind her like silk, lacking a bit of the usual sharp coldness of the Supreme Pontiff, and possessing a bit more lazy elegance. She was dressed in a luxurious light purple robe, the fabric of excellent quality, shimmering with light. The cuffs and lapels were embroidered with fine and solemn golden patterns, intricate and magnificent, revealing a dignity that could not be violated. Fang Yuan was also wearing an exceptionally luxurious white robe with gold trim, which was very similar to the one Bibi Dong was wearing. Chrysanthemum Douluo, who was standing on the side watching the whole process, had an expression that had long since become incomparably strange. His gaze couldn't help but glance at Fang Yuan over and over again, his eyes filled with shock and disbelief. As an elder of Spirit Hall who had held a high position for many years, he knew the clothing regulations within Spirit Hall all too well. This white and gold robe on Fang Yuan was by no means ordinary clothing. It was the saint ceremonial robe that only the saint of Spirit Hall was qualified to wear during major ceremonies, sacrifices, and important occasions. It symbolized status, symbolized the legacy, and symbolized a nobility that was below the Supreme Pontiff but above 10,000 people. But now, the Supreme Pontiff had personally used a robe of such specifications on a boy who had just been captured. Standing in the corner, Chrysanthemum Douluo's heart was pounding, and the more he thought about it, the more alarmed he became. He dared not ask more, nor dared he say more, he could only lower his head, forcibly suppressing all his shock and doubts in his heart. This saint robe, coupled with Bibi Dong's extremely abnormal attitude. Chrysanthemum Douluo desperately tried to comfort himself in his heart, attempting to come up with a reasonable explanation. Perhaps, the Supreme Pontiff had taken a fancy to this child's talent and wanted to make an exception to appoint him as the current saint of Spirit Hall, which was why she bestowed the saint robe and granted such extraordinary treatment. But this thought instantly froze in place the moment Bibi Dong led Fang Yuan directly into the Supreme Pontiff's exclusive secret chamber. The expression on Chrysanthemum Douluo's face completely froze, and his eyes became incomparably complex. He suddenly remembered the deceased former Supreme Pontiff, Qian Xunji. Is this also considered a kind of master-disciple legacy? Beside him, Ghost Douluo also had his brows tightly locked, his lips pressed into a straight line. He had clearly also sensed the eerie atmosphere within. Bibi Dong took in the subtle changes in their expressions, her eyes sinking slightly, and a faint, cold spirit power pressure instantly rose around her. You too, remember. Her voice was not loud, but it carried unquestionable majesty and warning. Everything you have seen and heard today regarding Fang Yuan must rot in your stomachs. You are not allowed to leak a single word to the outside. A terrifying pressure suddenly descended. Chrysanthemum Douluo and Ghost Douluo stiffened, held firmly in check by this force, making it difficult even to breathe. The two dared not show any further abnormality, immediately collecting all their thoughts, and respectfully lowered their heads to respond, "Yes, Supreme Pontiff." Until Fang Yuan was sent into the secret chamber and the heavy stone door slowly closed, completely isolating the outside world, Bibi Dong's heart, which had been hanging for a long time, finally slowly settled, evoking a faint sense of peace of mind. This was Spirit City, the Supreme Pontiff Palace, the secret chamber she controlled with one hand. It was all her territory, absolutely safe. Over the next few days, Bibi Dong stayed by Fang Yuan's side almost without leaving a single step. Treating him like the most precious treasure, she kept him firmly within her line of sight, as if only in this way could she be sure that the other party would not disappear into thin air like before. Until several days later, when the mountains of official business and incoming messages could no longer be shirked, Bibi Dong had to leave temporarily. She was the Supreme Pontiff of Spirit Hall, leading the entire Spirit Hall, with complicated affairs. Furthermore, she shouldered the Rakshasa God's trial and had inseparable divinity trials. She could be willful for a few days, but she could not abandon everything forever just to accompany Fang Yuan trapped in this secret chamber. Before leaving, she took one last deep look at the boy inside the secret chamber, her fingertips gently brushing across the door. "Wait for me to return obediently," she whispered to herself, her tone filled with reluctance and assertiveness. "This time, I will not let you escape again." Chapter 49, Alluring Bones and Calamitous Heart, you were born in the God realm. Inside the Supreme Pontiff Palace, the candlelight flickered on and off, making the tall, cold, and glamorous figure in the hall appear even more majestic and awe-inspiring. Bibi Dong had just returned from the secret chamber. Her magnificent Supreme Pontiff robe still carried the chill from outside, and an unresolvable baleful aura was congealed between her brows. As soon as she sat down, she raised her eyes to look at the deacon bowing and waiting below the steps, her voice as cold as if it had been quenched in ice. Have Du Guyan and Tang San been found yet? The previous oversight had already caused her endless trouble. Tang San was gifted with extraordinary talent and limitless potential, and behind him stood the support of the Clear Sky Douluo and the Shrek powerhouses. As Du Gubo's granddaughter, Du Guyan's talent for poison was also not to be underestimated. If these two were allowed to grow, they would surely become major threats in the future. She had always believed in cutting weeds and eliminating the roots. She was unwilling to leave any opponent a chance to breathe, and even less willing to nourish a tiger that would cause trouble, effectively digging her own grave. However, the deacon below the steps had cold sweat seeping from his forehead, his voice trembling, replying to Your Majesty, we have followed your orders and turned the entire city and the surrounding dense forests upside down, but we have still not found any trace of those two. Upon hearing this, Bibi Dong's fingertips clenched tightly, her knuckles turning white. A suffocating pressure of spirit power suddenly surged around her, causing the candlelight in the hall to flicker wildly in an instant. A cold light flared in her eyes, but she ultimately suppressed her anger and said coldly, continue searching. Even if you have to dig 3 feet into the ground, you must find them for me. Yes, the deacon, as if granted amnesty, hurriedly retreated. Meanwhile, inside the secret chamber, after confirming that Bibi Dong's aura had completely receded and the pressure from the Supreme Pontiff Palace had dissipated, Fang Yuan finally relaxed his tense back, leaning against the cold stone wall and exhaling a long breath of turbid air. During this time, he had been imprisoned here. He appeared silent, but in reality, he had never stopped thinking. In the darkness, he replayed his past over and over, analyzing himself, trying to clarify why, as a transmigrator who only wanted to achieve godhood peacefully and leave through ascension, had he fallen step by step into his current desperate situation, firmly controlled by Bibi Dong and unable to move. The root cause was buried from the very beginning. When he first transmigrated to the Douluo Continent, he awakened a seemingly useless trash spirit, with 0 innate spirit power, a completely trash physique. Precisely because of this, when the simulator Golden Finger appeared out of thin air, he was overwhelmed by immense joy. After learning that the simulator had no limit on the number of uses, he couldn't wait to start one simulation after another, his heart filled with thoughts of defying heaven to change his fate and quickly achieving godhood. Yet he never settled down to carefully study the rules, hidden dangers, and side effects of the simulator. By the time those fatal side effects erupted one by one, he realized his mistake, but he had already fallen into a passive state, unable to turn things around. What was even more fatal were the character weaknesses carved into his bones. He came from a peaceful era, his previous life had been stable and smooth, never having experienced the bloody cruelty of this continent. After transmigrating, his mindset had never truly shifted. Whether in the simulated world or in reality, he was too soft-hearted and hesitant, always holding onto a sliver of unrealistic kindness, not understanding what it meant to cut weeds and eliminate the roots. In his first simulation, he clearly knew his fate in advance, and was even clearer about Bibi Dong's tragic past and ruthless methods in the original story, knowing that she would stir up bloody storms in the future. Yet at that time, looking at Bibi Dong, who had not yet completely darkened and was still unable to control her own fate, he ultimately couldn't bring himself to be ruthless and find an opportunity to strike. At that time, he still held on to the bottom line of his previous life: do not kill innocent people. He considered himself a good person in the traditional sense and could not, with a clear conscience, ruthlessly kill someone who had not yet committed heinous crimes. Coupled with the fact that he never intended to stay long in the lower realm and was focused solely on accumulating strength to achieve godhood and leave as quickly as possible, he adopted an attitude of indifference and chose to turn a blind eye. In the end, what he got in return was being mercilessly backstabbed by Bibi Dong, leaving him dead and his soul in danger. In the second simulation, he started as a slave and was bought by Qian Xunji. At that time, Qian Runxui's possessiveness was morbidly strong. She viewed him as an object, keeping him firmly imprisoned by her side, hindering his path to godhood at every turn. The two eventually had a complete falling out, and he ended up being imprisoned until death. Looking back now, there were clearly countless opportunities back then to feign compliance, falsely submit, and secretly plot to take action against Qian Xunji to eliminate future trouble forever, but he insisted on acting on impulse and refused to lower his head, ultimately failing miserably. The third simulation, not worth considering. Only in the fourth simulation were his choices and actions finally without major flaws. In the early stages, he restrained his sharpness, followed the rules, and cultivated. According to the rules of this continent, in the later stages, having experienced hardships and becoming completely darkened, his heart nature became ruthless, his strength surged, and he was invincible. Yet, he bore the life of a spirit beast. Even after transforming into human form, he seemed to be bound by the rules of heaven and earth, cutting off his path to godhood. In the end, unwilling to accept this, he forcibly challenged the 100-level limit, desiring to defy heaven and achieve godhood, only to end up being struck by the 9 heavens' divine lightning, resulting in his soul flying away and spirit scattering. Whenever he thought of this, Fang Yuan was filled with helplessness. Even now, he couldn't understand why, as an honest person who from beginning to end only wanted to peacefully achieve ascension and godhood, and who had never actively provoked anyone, he would end up with so many strange and life-threatening fates. And this fatal soft-heartedness did not just exist in the simulations, it also existed in the real world. Previously, at the Ice and Fire Yin-Yang Well, when he escaped, he clearly had the opportunity to completely eliminate Du Guyan to avoid future trouble, but he ultimately showed mercy. Later, when surrounded and suppressed by Spirit Hall pursuers, he was in the Blue-Silver Forest with the help of the Blue-Silver King, and occupied the advantage of terrain. He could have completely set a death trap to kill all those pursuers and permanently eliminate the trouble of being tracked. Yet he hesitated once again, was soft-hearted once again, and did not deal a lethal blow, choosing instead to flee and avoid being tracked. It was precisely this hesitation and mercy that ultimately brought about the Spirit Hall Supreme Pontiff Bibi Dong. One wrong step, every step wrong. A single thought of kindness, falling into the abyss. Fang Yuan closed his eyes, his fingertips digging deeply into his palms. The cold pain made him increasingly clear-headed. He could not continue to be soft-hearted. After clearing his thoughts, Fang Yuan planned to start another simulation. Anyway, he was already imprisoned. Even if the simulation had side effects, it would have no impact on him, now imprisoned in the secret chamber of the Supreme Pontiff Palace in Spirit City. Moreover, it was impossible for him to never use the simulator again. However, when allocating destiny points, because of the surprise from last time, Fang Yuan had other ideas. Aptitude +8, Comprehension ability +3, Family background +20. Open black lens bracket simulation start close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket host draws fate, alluring bones and calamitous heart close black lens bracket. Fang Yuan looked at this fate, already accustomed to it. Open black lens bracket you are born in the God realm, close black lens bracket. Chapter 50, God bestowed spirit, twin God plan. Fang Yuan looked at this passage, the corners of his mouth curling upward. Your conjecture was successful. Last time, his comprehension ability was 0 and his aptitude was 8, so he obtained the identity of a spirit beast with 0 initial intelligence. Therefore, Fang Yuan had been wondering if it was possible to successfully roll those special identities. For example, child of a divinity. And now, this conjecture had come true. Open black lens bracket you were born in the God realm, and your parents are the food god and the 9-colored goddess, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket as a child born in the God realm, you received blessings and attention from many divinities, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket the god of destruction and the goddess of life also arrived together, looking at you in your swaddling clothes with envy. How wonderful it would be if they could also have a child, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket offspring of divinities are rare, as the first child born in the God realm in such a long time, you received much attention, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket the food god had not expected that he and his wife, the 9-colored goddess, could actually bear a child. Being a father for the first time, he was extremely excited while holding you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The food god no longer searched for a successor in the lower realm. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. He believed that as the child of him and his wife, the nine-colored goddess, your talent was fully capable of inheriting his own god position. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Upon birth, you awakened the spirit from your father, Rice. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your parents were both support-type spirit masters in the past, and they worried that you would be bullied due to a lack of self-preservation power. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. They wanted to find a combat-type divinity to bestow a spirit upon you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Hearing the news, the Rakshasa god took the initiative to approach them under their surprised gazes, expressing a willingness to bestow upon you the divine rank spirit, Rakshasa Martial Soul. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The food god and the nine-colored goddess hesitated slightly before agreeing. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The Rakshasa god was a first-class divinity, sharing the same origin as the Asura god, and possessed great strength. If it helped, it would be enough to protect you as you grew up smoothly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You grew up day by day in the god realm, turning from a chubby little baby into a beautiful, fair-skinned child. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The god of destruction, the goddess of life, and the Rakshasa god often came to see you. You had a head of pure black long hair, tied up by your mother, the nine-colored goddess, with the ends hanging down smoothly to your waist. Dressed in a white robe with a fair and delicate face, you were a beautiful little celestial child. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As you grew to 6 years old, you had to officially begin to cultivate. Your parents had to send you to the lower realm to grow up and let you experience the god's trial. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. They carefully selected and chose between Seagod Island and Spirit Hall, finally choosing to entrust you to Seagod Island. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. After all, the angel was nowhere to be found, leaving only a trace of divine thought in the god realm, while the sea god resided in the god realm and could communicate with believers in the lower realm at any time, making it convenient to take care of you and also to fleece the sheep. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. They sought out the sea god to discuss, and the sea god generously agreed to your parents' request. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were received by the current high priestess of Seagod Island. She knew your identity and was very respectful. Your status on Seagod Island was special, and you were given the title of Child of God. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You possessed the divine rank spirit, Rakshasa Martial Soul, bestowed by the Rakshasa god, and your innate spirit power was also raised to the maximum level. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As the special child of God of Seagod Island, you sat on a high platform, watching this spirit awakening ceremony. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A delicate and beautiful little girl walked to the center of the awakening formation. Her spirit was guided to awaken by the spirit master of Seagod Island. Her spirit power reached level 8, which was the most outstanding one so far. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were especially attentive to her because her name was High Priestess Bo Saishi. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You smiled at her, inwardly pondering the utility of High Priestess Bo Saishi. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Relying on High Priestess Bo Saixi's age, you finally confirmed the current timeline. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. There was no Tang San, no Bibi Dong, no Qian Xunji. You were still the child of a divinity, and you felt that becoming a god this time should be a sure thing. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At 10 years old, you had worked hard to cultivate and reached level 30. The Sea Soul Masters of Seagod Island helped you hunt spirit rings and provided whale glue for physical training. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As an outstanding spirit master of the younger generation, High Priestess Bo Saishi began to appear in front of you frequently, and you tried to win her over. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As a devout believer of the sea god, upon learning of your identity as the child of a divinity, the way High Priestess Bo Saishi looked at you became fanatical and morbid. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You subdued her without any effort. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You finally reached 18 years old and had cultivated to a level 68 Spirit Emperor, with a spirit ring configuration of yellow, purple, purple, black, black, black. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You and High Priestess Bo Saishi started the Seagod Island trials together, both being red level 8 trials. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You were mentally prepared. Your parents had told you from the beginning that you were here at Seagod Island to fleece the sheep. After passing the trials, you could leave Seagod Island and proceed to the Food God God's trial. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At 20 years old, you successfully completed the red level 8 trials. High Priestess Bo Saishi had not yet completed hers. Upon learning the news that you were leaving, she ran to you and asked if it was true. You looked at her somewhat excited appearance, nodded, and comforted her, saying you would return to Seagod Island after handling matters outside. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You barely managed to appease High Priestess Bo Saishi, and she said she would wait for you to return. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You left Seagod Island and came to the mainland. After conveniently farming the ice and fire yin-yang well to improve your aptitude, you cultivated while traveling. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At 22 years old, you were already a level 86 spirit Douluo with a spirit ring configuration of yellow, purple, purple, black, 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 red. You encountered Tang Chen and Qian Xunji separately and sparred with them. Because both sides had titled Douluo backing them, it ended with a friendly exchange. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. When your Food God God's trial reached the 7th stage, you saw the Rakshasa god after a long time. It tempted you, asking if you wanted to inherit the Rakshasa god position. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. During the first simulation, you refused without hesitation, but this time, you reported it to your parents without hesitation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The food god was surprised that the Rakshasa god actually wanted you to inherit the Rakshasa god position. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The food god and his wife, the 9-colored goddess, found the Rakshasa god. Both sides negotiated for a long time, and finally, a consensus was reached. You would inherit both the Rakshasa god position and the food god position simultaneously. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The Rakshasa god was somewhat annoyed that you were not tempted by its bewitchment and even reported it to your parents, so it made the content of your god's trial extremely strict. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your father, the food god, told you that you possessed a twin spirit's amplification physique, had consumed whale glue for physical training, and had used immortal herbs to improve your physical fitness and aptitude. If you added a 10,000-year, no, a 100,000-year spirit bone set, it would be enough to inherit both god positions simultaneously. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At the same time, he also warned you to be careful of the Rakshasa god. The Rakshasa god was originally a divinity of the evil faction, whose actions were strange, evil, and good at bewitching people's hearts. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Actually, if it weren't for their insufficient strength, and the fact that neither he nor his wife were combat-type divinities, they would not have agreed to the Rakshasa god's twin god plan. Close black lens bracket.